Chapter 927. Alex had already inquired about the situation when Princess Anne was attacked yesterday. When he found out about Tang Zheng's heroic actions, he was still a little indignant, thinking that those mercenaries were too weak, so he took advantage of them. He wished that he was the one accompanying Anne at that time, so that the role of the hero saving the beauty would fall on his head. But at this moment, seeing Tang Zheng's skill, his heart couldn't help but beat wildly. This skill was almost on par with the Holy Knight at home. No, how can he be compared to the Holy Knight? He hurriedly shook his head, denying this absurd idea. But he didn't know that Tang Zheng had only displayed a portion of his strength to deal with his guards. Tang Zheng felt something and looked up, coincidentally meeting Alex's eyes. Alex subconsciously took a step back. This was because Tang Zheng's eyes were so sharp that even though they were separated by a window, they were still like a sharp sword. Let's go. Let's go up and meet Alex. Tang Zheng held Mu Hongyan's hand and walked in with large strides. Meeting Alex at the stairs, Alex didn't run away in a panic. This was his castle. If he ran away, then people would laugh their heads off. You have guts, actually daring to break into my house, Alex said with a gloomy face. But his eyes were fixed on Tang Zheng and Mu Hongyan's hands that were held together, and he shouted, I knew I wasn't wrong. That night it was the two of you, right? You lied to Anne. Mu Hongyan heard this and wanted to withdraw her hand, but Tang Zheng held on tightly. Since Alex had already broken through once, then he wasn't afraid of a second time. If you tell Anne, will she believe you? Tang Zheng asked indifferently. You. Alex's white cheeks immediately swelled red. You lied to her. One day, she will see through your true colors. Do you really like Anne that much? Tang Zheng asked. Of course. I've liked her since I was a teenager. I swore that I would definitely pursue her. I've already defeated many opponents, but I didn't expect that you would appear out of nowhere. Alex felt wronged. What if I tell you that I have no feelings for Anne at all? Tang Zheng asked. These were his heartfelt words. He already had enough women by his side. Although Anne was outstanding and had a noble status, he really didn't have any improper thoughts about her. Otherwise, with his charm and methods, he would have conquered Princess Anne's body and mind. What? No idea. Alex looked as if he had seen a ghost. No one had ever said such a thing. From the elderly to the children, everyone admired Princess Anne. This person actually said that he didn't have any feelings for her. Was he a fool? He didn't believe it. He sneered and said, Do you think I'll let my guard down and let you take advantage of this situation? Tang Zheng was slightly stunned. He laughed involuntarily. I don't care whether you believe it or not. I'm just stating my thoughts. I didn't come to Europe to fight with you for Anne. I'm not your enemy. But if you really treat me as an enemy, the one who will suffer in the end will definitely be you, not me. Ha, what a joke. This is Europe. Do you think it's that ancient and backward Huaxia? Alex laughed disdainfully. Tang Zheng shook his head. He turned to Mu Hongyan and said, Some people are just stubborn. When I talk to him nicely, he thinks that I'm weak. Sigh, it's really troublesome. Looking at his playful appearance, Mu Hongyan couldn't help but laugh. She played along and asked, Then what should we do? That's why martial arts are very useful in many situations. Because it's more direct and doesn't need to waste time. After Tang Zheng finished speaking, he grabbed with his hand and used the sky-swallowing technique. A powerful suction force gushed out from his palm. Alex screamed, What are you doing? Then, he was forced to fly towards Tang Zheng and was firmly caught by him. Although Alex was a member of the Rothschild family, he didn't practice any profound martial arts. He only knew some basic martial arts. How could he be compared to Tang Zheng? But he was quite knowledgeable. Looking at Tang Zheng's move, he was really shocked. Because, even a holy knight didn't have this kind of ability. Witchcraft, this is definitely witchcraft. He roared. Tang Zheng laughed. Who said it was witchcraft? If it's not witchcraft, then what is it? I think you're really a frog at the bottom of a well. I even suspect that you're a member of the Rothschild family. Louis of the Rockefeller family knows much more than you. Tang Zheng shook his head and sighed. Alex was stunned. He asked, you know that despicable person Louis? Oh, you also think he's a despicable person? Of course, he's the best at playing tricks. He's made me suffer quite a few times. Alex said bitterly. With your methods, you'll only be at a disadvantage in front of him. Tang Zheng nodded in agreement. What do you mean? No, how do you know Louis? Are you in cahoots with him? You should know that Louis is dead, right? Of course, I heard that he was killed by someone. It's really satisfying. If I meet this hero, I'll definitely thank him for his gentlemanly actions. Alex said. Ha ha ha. Tang Zheng finally couldn't help but laugh. What are you laughing at? Alex was confused. Don't laugh. Thank you for your praise. I can reluctantly accept the title of hero. Tang Zheng said enigmatically. Alex's eyes rolled a few times. He seemed to be thinking about the meaning of Tang Zheng's words. After a while, he reacted and looked at Tang Zheng in disbelief. You're saying you killed Bruce? Tang Zheng smiled and nodded. Alex was about to tell him to stop bragging, but seeing Tang Zheng's reaction, he swallowed his words back. Because he was sure that the other party didn't seem to be bragging. Then his background was too big. He actually dared to kill Louis. Who exactly are you? Alex asked, still in shock. A Huaxia person. Nonsense, when did Huaxia people have such guts? That's Louis. You killed him. Would the Rockefeller family let you go? Alex retorted with a look of disbelief. Who said they let me go? Nicholas personally brought people to kill me. Tang Zheng calmly said. Alex's eyes almost popped out. His heart jumped to his throat. He took a deep breath and suppressed the shock in his heart. Liar. Nicholas wants to kill you. How can you stand in front of me in one piece? You've already died who knows how many times. Tang Zheng secretly sighed. Nicholas's name was indeed big in Europe. Even Alex was afraid of him. Why don't you believe me when I tell you the truth? How can I believe your lies? I'm not a fool. Alex said with a look of self-confidence. Who said you're not a fool? You don't even believe the truth. If you're not a fool, then what are you? When Alex heard this, his cheeks turned red. His eyes were about to spit fire. Tang Zheng ignored his anger and said, Nicholas came to kill me. But in the end, he also died in my hands. Impossible. Impossible. Alex shook his head like a rattle drum, firmly denying it. What's impossible? How could you possibly kill Nikolai? That year, the 12 holy knights joined hands to resist him. Alex's worldview was about to collapse. The 12 holy knights were already very powerful in his heart. But without a doubt, Nicholas was even more powerful. Now that Tang Zheng said that Nicholas died in his hands, even if Alex was a little brainless, he still thought that it was impossible. Don't you know that Nicholas is already dead? Of course I know. But it's said that he died of a serious illness. Died of a serious illness? Are vampires afraid of getting sick? Tang Zheng laughed involuntarily. Alex's cheeks turned red. He understood vampires. It was said that they were immortal. How could they be afraid of getting sick? Could it be that Nicholas was really killed by him? Alex couldn't help but think, but he still couldn't accept this fact. Doesn't that mean he's more powerful than the 12 holy knights combined? Alex previously thought that Tang Zheng couldn't compare to the holy knights, but now it seemed that he was much more powerful than the holy knights. Alex's expression kept changing. He looked at Tang Zheng with a complicated expression. The faint smile on Tang Zheng's face suddenly became unfathomable. He took a deep breath and said, You caught me. Could it be that you want to kill me? The Rockefeller family is Rothschild's enemy. I helped you get rid of your enemy. Shouldn't you express your gratitude? Tang Zheng asked. Alex said, logically speaking, I should thank you. But you deceived Anne. Don't expect me to thank you. It seems that you are really infatuated with Anne. Of course. Alex raised his head proudly. Tang Zheng shook his head. It's not that I want to discourage you. Although I don't have any thoughts about Anne, she has no thoughts about you. What's the use of you being so passionate? My sincerity will always move her. Alex was full of confidence. I didn't come to you today to talk about these romantic matters. Your Rothschild family's intelligence is said to be the best in Europe, right? Alex wasn't an idiot. He knew what she was trying to say and said, you want to ask for information from my family. You're not too stupid. Who said I'm stupid? Alex was furious. He looked down at the hand that grabbed him and sneered. You have a request, but you treat me like this. Do you think I will give you information? This is because you don't cooperate. Tang Zheng let go of his hand. Alex tidied up his clothes and said, based on what you did to Anne, I won't cooperate with you. Is that so? I didn't come to you to beg you. If you don't cooperate, I'm afraid you will suffer a lot. Moreover, I don't think you know the information, so take me to see your family. You dare to go to my family? Why wouldn't I dare? Tang Zheng shrugged. Nicholas made your family suffer a lot. I don't think I'm weaker than Nicholas. Chapter 928. Who said I want to be your family's enemy? If you capture me and interrogate me for information, won't that make you my family's enemy? Alex retorted. Can you represent your family? Of course. Alex answered with a guilty conscience. Tang Zheng declined to comment as he lightly smiled and said, bring me to your clan. There are no conditions to be discussed. Finished speaking, he grabbed Alex with his big hand. Alex screamed, but there was nothing he could do. Go! Tang Zheng gave a low shout and walked out of the castle with large strides. The other guards wanted to stop him, but they could not get up. They could only watch as Tang Zheng grabbed their family's young master and left. Mu Hongyan's eyes were full of splendor. She was not afraid, but rather excited. Young Master Tang, please show mercy. Bruce finally rushed over anxiously and stood in front of the three of them. Young Master Tang, don't act recklessly. Seeing Tang Zheng grab Alex's collar, Bruce earnestly advised. I'm not being reckless. But this. Bruce's face was ugly as he pointed at Tang Zheng's hand. I'm asking him to cooperate with me and take me to visit the Rothschild family. What, you want to visit the Rothschild family? Bruce turned pale with fright. Even His Majesty the King would not easily get involved with the Rothschild family. Because the other party was too mysterious. Putting himself in danger was not a wise move. Absolutely not. Bruce hurriedly used his body to block them and desperately shook his head. Young Master Tang, listen to my advice. The Rothschild family is not an ordinary place. You absolutely cannot put yourself in danger. Tang Zheng was anxious to know the real culprit behind the scenes and said firmly, I won't go. Do you have a way to get them to tell me the information? This. I don't have that much power. But His Majesty can coordinate. Bruce said. Tang Zheng laughed secretly. His Majesty was already in a terrible fix because of the disappearance of the crystals. How could he have the time to think about these things? In the king's mind, the matter of the crystals was obviously more important than this matter. Bruce, go back and tell His Majesty that I'll be back soon. Don't worry. If I really don't come back, ask Tian Chanzi to come and find me. Tang Zheng's tone was relaxed, as if he was traveling. This made Alex want to vomit blood. Even the royal family was afraid of his family, but in Tang Zheng's eyes, his family was like a tourist attraction. He could enter and leave as he pleased. Tang Zheng did not take it seriously at all. He made up his mind and said, since you look down on my clans so much, I'll take you there. However, don't run away when the time comes. Do you think I'll run away? Tang Zheng asked with a smile. Alex was not sure. Thinking of what Tang Zheng had done to Louis and Nicholas, he felt even more guilty. Well, since you've thought it through, then lead the way. Don't play tricks, or you'll be the one to suffer. Tang Zheng warned. Alex snorted and did not comment. He strode toward the parking lot and said, "If you have the guts, then get in the car with me." Tang Zheng and Mu Hongyan did not hesitate to follow. Bruce was in a dilemma. He could not follow, but it seemed inappropriate not to follow. He was burning with anxiety. He angrily stomped his foot, turned around and walked away. He said to himself, "I must report to His Majesty immediately. Young Master Tang is too reckless. If he really has a conflict with the Rothschild family, it will be terrible." Alex drove, and the group of people rushed to their destination. The Rothschild family was not in Sweden. They had to cross the country's border and go north. After 2 days of unimpeded driving, they entered another small country. This small country was just a small dot on the map. It might not even be as big as a prefecture-level city in Huaxia. It was full of green, making people feel relaxed and happy. My family is about to arrive. It's not too late to back out now. Alex said bitterly. In these 2 days, they had only taken a short rest. The rest of the time, Alex was driving. His mind and body had suffered a great deal. His eyes were bloodshot. He occasionally wanted to crash into a tree next to him. He wanted to destroy the car and perish together with the other party. Concentrate on driving. You don't need to worry about anything else. Tang Zheng said lightly. This kind of long journey was a piece of cake for him. Even Mu Hongyan did not feel tired. She had tasted the taste of cultivation for the first time. Along the way, she was carefully comprehending the mysteries of cultivation. A majestic castle gradually appeared, and only when it was close enough did they get a full view of it. Compared to the previous castle, it was like the difference between an eagle and a chick. This castle was too magnificent. Although it could not be compared with the imperial city in Huaxia, it was definitely second to none in Europe. It was the largest and most magnificent castle. Just by looking at it from afar, a sense of grandeur and the vicissitudes of history hit them in the face. Mu Hongyan's eyes widened in surprise. The Rothschild family's heritage is really extraordinary. Alex raised his head high. His bloodshot eyes were full of pride. Suddenly, Tang Zheng felt danger lurking on both sides of the road. He remained calm and said without even looking, "Your family has so many people lying in ambush on both sides of the road. What's the use?" Alex's eyelids twitched. Tang Zheng did not even look, but he actually found the people lurking in the dark. He was too amazing. In the face of Tang Zheng's ridicule, Alex immediately retorted, "Nonsense. Whether it's nonsense or not, you'll see in a moment." As soon as he finished speaking, a white horse rushed out of the castle. This seemed to be a signal. Following closely behind, 11 white horses rushed out like a wisp of smoke. These 12 horses had pure white hair without a trace of impurities. They were like the champions of a horse beauty contest. The 12 people on the horses were all wearing thick armor and helmets with a metallic luster on their heads. Their faces could not be seen clearly, but without exception, they all had imposing appearances. Screech! The car suddenly braked, leaving a long tire mark on the ground. Alex almost hit his head on the steering wheel. His eyes were round as he stared at the 12 horsemen coming towards him as if he had seen a ghost. The corner of his mouth twitched fiercely and said, "The 12 holy knights are all out." Ever since the defeat of the Rockefeller family, the 12 holy knights had disappeared. Even if there was a real threat, there had never been a situation where the 12 holy knights were all out. This time, the 12 holy knights were all out. How could Alex not be shocked? He subconsciously turned his head to look at Tang Zheng. His lips opened and closed, but not a single word came out. Alex understood very well that since the family had sent out the 12 holy knights, it naturally meant that they already knew that Tang Zheng had the corresponding strength. In other words, what Tang Zheng said was true. Louis and Nicholas had died at his hands. Tang Zheng stared fixedly at the 12 holy knights and said with interest, "Your family is smarter than you. They didn't send 1 or 2 holy knights to deal with me. Instead, they sent out all of them." Tang Zheng opened the door and got out, standing in front of the car. Mu Hongyan also wanted to get out, but she was stopped by Tang Zheng with a wave of his hand. "You just watch from the car. No one can cross this line and hurt you." Mu Hongyan's eyes were full of spirit. The corner of her mouth hooked up into a faint smile as she stayed in the car as she was told. She took the lead, with the others half a step behind. The 12 holy knights stopped at the same time, as if they had been trained countless times. Tang Zheng stood steadily in the same place, raising his head to look at the 12 holy knights. "I know your intentions. You definitely want to fight, so I won't say much. Let's talk after the fight." Tang Zheng seemed to be deep in thought. Since the Rothschild family didn't come out and let the 12 holy knights come out together, it was naturally to further test his strength. Tang Zheng held War Soul in his hand and walked towards the other party step by step. He strolled leisurely, as if this wasn't a battlefield, but a park. The holy knight in the lead raised his sword. The wide and thick heavy sword shone coldly under the sunlight. Even under the scorching sun, it made people feel a soul-stirring murderous aura. The heavy sword, the armor, and the fierce horse formed a strange scenery under the sunlight. The holy knight in the lead raised the heavy sword in his hand and aimed it at Tang Zheng. With a shake of the reins, he charged forward as fast as lightning. At the same time, the other holy knights also charged together. Their heavy swords were all aimed at Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng suddenly accelerated, like a gust of wind. This time he chose to meet force with force. Puff puff puff, the 12 holy knights arrived one after another, layer upon layer, and slashed at Tang Zheng who was on the ground. However, Tang Zheng disappeared. They looked up in shock and found that he had actually flown above their heads and slashed down with War Soul. Swoosh swoosh swoosh, 12 rays of sword light fell from the sky, as if the sunlight was split apart by these 12 rays of sword light. Bang bang bang. 12 crisp sounds rang out. All the heavy swords were hit by these rays of sword light. 12 cracks appeared, then turned into 24, 36, and finally, there were more and more. Pa pa pa, the 12 holy knights shattered into pieces one after another. The holy knight looked at the heavy sword in his hand dumbfoundedly. He was so shocked that his eyeballs almost popped out from behind his helmet. With just one move, victory and defeat were decided. They never thought that someone could achieve this kind of power. They looked at the thin figure in shock, and the sword in his hand that was suffused with light. Their heroic spirit could not help but disappear. Tang Zheng was also surprised at his own fighting strength. Yuanying realm was indeed extraordinary. An endless stream of true qi filled his body and mind, and then merged into War Soul. It was also the heaven-flying immortal sword technique, but its power was much higher than before. His fighting spirit was high, his eyes lit up, and he was ready to completely destroy the opponent's arrogance in one go. Thus, he floated in the air and raised War Soul once again. Suddenly, a strange yet familiar thought entered his mind. His arms subconsciously waved, and War Soul fell. Mighty, completely different sword chi slashed down with an earth-shattering force. Tai Chi Yin Yang Sword Technique. The Tai Chi Yin Yang sword technique that he had completely forgotten suddenly appeared out of thin air. Chapter 929. Tang Zheng had only learned 2 moves of the Tai Chi Yin Yang sword technique, and this time, he was using the first move. Although he was shocked, the War Soul sword had already slashed down. Peng peng peng, with a series of explosions, the 12 holy knights fell from their horses and fell to the ground. Their heavy armor was scattered and turned into pieces. They revealed their true appearance. Except for the leader who was an old man, the others were all young men. Tang Zheng was stunned. Except for the old man, the other holy knights were definitely not the ones who had attacked the Rockefeller family. Perhaps they were their descendants. These people climbed up from the ground in a sorry state and looked at Tang Zheng with a pale face. They were in a dilemma. If they fought, they would definitely not win. If they fled, that would be too shameful. Tang Zheng ignored them. He turned his head and walked towards the car door, reaching out his hand. He said, "Sister Mu, come down. The outcome has been decided." Mu Hongyan happily got off the car, as if she had won the battle. She looked at him passionately. If there were not so many people, she would have given him a kiss. Alex lay on the ground on the steering wheel and hit the horn hard, making an ear-piercing sound. He kept growling, "Impossible. This is not real." Although he was mentally prepared, he did not expect the 12 holy knights to be defeated so easily. Tang Zheng held Mu Hongyan and walked in front of the holy knights. The old man suddenly asked, "This is Huaxia's magic? You are more knowledgeable than Alex." Tang Zheng nodded. "It is indeed powerful." The old man praised from the bottom of his heart. His eyes kept changing, and finally sighed, "You are a guest. Please come this way, the family head has been waiting for a long time." Tang Zheng understood in his heart, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. This was the same as his judgment, the 12 holy knights were testing his skills. If he was not the same as the rumors, then there was naturally no need to talk. He had proven his strength, so he was qualified to sit down and talk. He was not angry. Instead, he nodded slightly in agreement. Under the gazes of the holy knights, he followed the old man into the castle. A middle-aged man stood at the entrance to welcome them. He was the current head of the Rothschild family, Alex's father, Abraham. Abraham was tall and had a sharp gaze. There were a few wrinkles on his forehead, which made him look very dignified. Abraham saw the battle just now. His greatest reliance had been defeated so easily. One could imagine the storm in his heart. However, he did not panic. According to the information he received, the other party was not an enemy. They were here for information. Moreover, the King of Sweden's personal call had dispelled a lot of the hostility in his heart, but it was also reasonable to test Tang Zheng's strength. Of course, he knew Tang Zheng better than many people and knew that the Rockefeller family had actually fallen into his hands. Of course, he would not repeat the mistakes of the Rockefeller family. Only cooperation could lead to a win-win situation. This was his strategy. He first extended his hand, took a step forward, and shook hands with Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng was relieved. This was the same as what he had expected. This was a smart person. Not everyone in the world was an enemy. If a person really became the enemy of the whole world, no matter how strong they were, it would be difficult to escape the fate of being eliminated. He was beyond the reach of Europe and even the Atlantic Empire. He needed such a strong and smart partner. "Welcome," Abraham said briefly and powerfully. "Thank you." Tang Zheng nodded and said directly, "I need information." Abraham waved to his attendant, who came over with an exquisite gilded plate with a piece of paper on it. "The information you want is here." Tang Zheng nodded approvingly. This was a smart person. It was easy to deal with smart people. Tang Zheng opened the paper and immediately frowned. There was a long list of names on it. There was more than one, and they were all familiar names. He had seen these people before. "It's them." "Yes, they were the ones who assassinated Princess Anne and attacked you in business," Abraham said in an absolute tone. No one doubted the truth of his words. "So that's how it is." Tang Zheng suddenly realized. He gradually understood why these people were so deranged. These people were actually the European royal families who had cooperated with Tang Zheng. At that time, when they heard the news of Tang Zheng's death, they abandoned the spirit of the contract and tore up the cooperation contract. Now that he had overthrown the Rockefeller family and was coming in strong, they wanted to cut him off and frame the Rothschild family. They wanted Tang Zheng to become enemies with this family and then profit from it. It was really a good plan. They even led the flames of war to my family. Naturally, I will not stay out of it. Abraham said calmly, but the anger hidden in his words was very strong. Then what are you going to do? Let them know what the Rothschild family relied on to stand for hundreds of years on this continent. Abraham said confidently. Then what am I going to do? Please wait and see. This is a greeting gift for a distinguished guest who has come from afar. This greeting gift is not light. Then I will wait and see. Tang Zheng did not decline pretentiously. From now on, I will protect your interests on this continent. Absolutely no one will dare to touch it. Abraham continued to express his attitude. Tang Zheng's eyes slightly narrowed. The conditions provided by Abraham were so good that it was beyond his expectations. What are your conditions? Tang Zheng asked. There are no conditions, because the Rothschild family wants to be true friends with you. Abraham said sincerely. Alex caught up and just happened to hear this sentence. His mouth was wide open as he looked in disbelief at his father's humble attitude. I like to make friends the most. I have always been good to my friends. My enemies don't like this very much. Tang Zheng said. Abraham said firmly, the Rothschild family will never be your enemy. Then we will take our leave. Abraham still wanted to urge him to stay, but in the end he resisted. If he wanted to further communicate with Tang Zheng and even become true friends, his next move was the key. Only by making Tang Zheng satisfied could their friendship be maintained. I will send you off. No need. Tang Zheng threw the War Soul sword into the air, and the War Soul sword floated steadily in the air. He held Mu Hongyan's hand and leaped onto the sword. So. War Soul turned into a sword light and disappeared without a trace. This kind of ghostly method caused the minds of the people present to go blank. After a long while, they finally retracted their gazes from the direction where War Soul disappeared. Alex was originally questioning him, but he could not say a single word. His head hung low as if it was about to fall into the dust. The 12 paladins were even more dejected and sighed. They had always boasted of being strong, but now they realized how weak they were. Abraham became even more determined in his thoughts and muttered to himself, the ancestors of the family once warned us that we must never set foot in the mysterious eastern Huaxia. After so many years, many people have long forgotten this admonition. Rockefeller practiced this admonition and finally made many people remember this iron law again. In ancient times, Huaxia was worthy of being called the center of the world. All countries worshipped it, but in the past few hundred years, the country's strength had become weaker and weaker. It was even bullied by the powers, making people forget that it was a dragon that had been sleeping. Abraham knew that the dragon was finally about to wake up. The iron law of the ancestors was indeed correct. If they cooperated with this dragon, the Rothschild family would be able to reach a higher level. If they were to become enemies, they would definitely be destroyed. The Rockefeller family was the best proof. Alex, from now on, you are not allowed to pursue Princess Anne. Abraham's gaze turned and he gave his son an unquestionable order. Alex raised his head and asked indignantly, why? Tang Zheng has already made it clear that he is not interested in Anne. But Anne is interested in him. Can't I pursue my own happiness? Alex was furious. Your happiness is not with Anne. Besides, after so many years, can't you recognize reality? Alex was speechless. Abraham ignored his son's grievances and said to the head of the paladins, action. The old man nodded and understood tacitly. Tang Zheng returned to the Swedish palace and suffered a lot of complaints from Princess Anne. Fortunately, His Majesty the King summoned him and he was able to escape from Anne's nagging. His Majesty the King and Tang Zheng had a secret discussion for a long time. When he heard the reaction of the Rothschild family, he was shocked. This old family finally put down their pride and took the initiative to show goodwill to Tang Zheng. This showed the importance of Tang Zheng. He couldn't help but feel a little moved. If Anne really came together with him, wouldn't it be a good thing? If the Rothschild family had this opportunity, they would definitely not let it go. Why should he let it go? Many of the marriages of the royal family members were for benefits. Although His Majesty the King felt sorry for Anne, since this was her wish, why not share the benefits with his daughter's happiness? It was a blessing to have the best of both worlds. Moreover, the mastermind behind the scenes this time was actually the royal family of those countries, which made him feel even more pressure. These countries had secretly formed an alliance. If he didn't firmly hold on to the big tree of Tangzheng, then his future days would definitely be difficult. Of course, he also blamed the disappearance of the crystal on the heads of these royal families, and his hostility towards them increased greatly. Immediately, the way he looked at Tangzheng gradually became thought-provoking. Tangzheng didn't notice the king's strange behavior. When he returned to his room, Anne chased after him and stared at him with wide eyes. She said angrily, "Do you know that you were wrong this time?" Tangzheng didn't think much of it. "What did I do wrong?" "You didn't care about your own safety and put yourself in danger." "If this isn't wrong, then what is?" And stared at him stubbornly. "I don't think there will be any danger." "What if there is?" "That's the Rothschild family, an existence that all the royal families in Europe are very afraid of." "Aren't I fine now?" All in all, this time I was worried to death. I'm very angry." And pouted, no different from a young girl in love. Chapter 930. Liking a person is a happy thing, but if the falling flower is in love with the heartless brook, then it will be torturous. In these few days, Anne understood her own feelings and confirmed that she liked Tangzheng. Especially when she heard that he was in danger, she wanted to fly over to help him. She pleaded with her father many times, and His Majesty was forced to call Abraham many times. Now that she finally saw him come back safe and sound, she had mixed feelings. She pouted and looked at him with hidden bitterness. "I was so worried about you. You didn't even coax me and went to see my father." And complained. Although Tangzheng was not interested in her, but she was a princess and cared about him so much. If he treated her coldly, it would be unreasonable. "Thank you, Anne." Anne's eyes suddenly lit up like a light and said, "Then how do you want to thank me?" "How do you want to thank me?" Tangzheng blinked his eyes with a headache. "Can't you tell that I am just being polite? How can you take advantage of me like this?" And raised her head, "My father doesn't want me to go to Huaxia." "You go and persuade him." "I want to go back to Huaxia." "Why do you want to go back?" "You don't want to go to school again." "I don't care." And acted spoiled like a little girl in love. After all, she was only 19 years old and this was the first time she liked someone. Tangzheng had a headache. She wanted to create an opportunity to get along with him. Wasn't this leading her astray? His Majesty has his own considerations. It is not good for me to interfere. Didn't you say that you want to thank me? You don't keep your promise at all. Tangzheng did not know whether to laugh or cry and explained, "This is your family's matter. It is not good for me to interfere. It is hard to leave your homeland. It is better for you to stay in your own country." "I don't want to do it. I have already stayed here for 19 years. I want to go to the outside world and explore it. However, if you stay here, I will not leave." And slyly said, "I will not stay. Then I won't stay." And was extremely stubborn. The two of them stared at each other, unwilling to give in. "In any case, this is my only request. Since you promised me, then you must fulfill it. Otherwise, I will hate you for the rest of my life." Is it that exaggerated? Of course, women hold grudges, and I'm one of them. You're a princess. Shouldn't you be elegant and tolerant? This is the real me now, and said stubbornly. 2 days later, an explosive piece of news spread. The kings on the list had all changed hands and were forced to abdicate their thrones. This caused the world's politics to tremble like an earthquake. Everyone was stunned, not knowing what had happened. Tangzheng understood that this was the work of the Rothschild family. Although he did not know how they did it, it was clear that they had great influence to make so many kings change owners at once. Tang Zheng couldn't help but rejoice. If he had insisted on going against the Rothschild family, although he wouldn't have failed, it would still be troublesome. He didn't have that much time to waste in Europe. All the obstacles disappeared. Mu Hongyan successfully took over the relevant industries, and Tang Zheng became a world-class superpower. Of course, the people in the country definitely didn't know. Only a few people knew that Rockefeller's industries had fallen into the hands of Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng didn't continue to pursue the matter. After all, it was impossible for him to really kill all those treacherous kings. Since they had lost their thrones, they had lost their most precious things. Naturally, they couldn't make any big waves. He had won this conflict. This series of events made His Majesty look at Tang Zheng in a new light, and he became more and more convinced of his idea. Mu Hongyan couldn't leave Europe for a while, but Tang Zheng couldn't delay any longer. However, he didn't leave her alone. He transferred a few witch tribe warriors from the country to protect her. Only then did he leave with peace of mind. During this time, the king finally couldn't help but want to persuade Tian Chanzi to stay, but he was rejected without hesitation. The king originally wanted Tian Chanzi to teach the royal cultivation method, but he couldn't bring himself to say this request after being rejected so rudely. Because he knew that he would definitely be rejected even if he brought it up, why bother? Seeing that the two of them were about to leave, the connection with them would definitely weaken. He was unwilling to give up, and finally made up his mind to let and accompany them back to Huaxia. This suggestion was out of everyone's expectations, but Annie was so excited that she almost jumped 3 feet into the air. She looked at Tang Zheng affectionately, mistakenly thinking that this was all because he was secretly pleading for her. The queen was quite dissatisfied with this decision, but after listening to the king's explanation, she could only choose to acquiesce. On the other hand, Tang Zheng rolled his eyes helplessly. He thought to himself, "Your Majesty, is there anyone who would throw their daughter away like this? It seems like she can't get married." Mu Hongyan secretly pulled Tang Zheng to the side and teased him. As a woman, she knew An's thoughts too well. She wasn't too jealous. Ever since she chose to accept Tang Zheng, she knew that all this was inevitable. She was the most open-minded of all the women. Perhaps it was related to her special experience that made her more mature and wise. With Tang Zheng's cultivation, it was almost impossible to monopolize him. She also didn't dare to have such extravagant hopes. Tang Zheng couldn't say anything, but he couldn't refuse An's infatuation. He thought to himself that he should just stay as far away from her as possible. However, when the two of them got on the plane, they realized how unrealistic this idea was. And was like a piece of candy, sticking to him closely. As for Tian Chanzi, he automatically became a third wheel and stayed far away from her. They didn't take a private plane back. And went to Huaxia as an ordinary person. However, the first-class cabin was still booked by the rich and imposing imperial family to prevent others from disturbing them. And lay beside Tang Zheng and said with a smile, "You swore that you wouldn't persuade my father, but you actually did it secretly. You really know how to surprise people." Tang Zheng rolled his eyes and said truthfully, "I didn't persuade him." "Humph, you're still quibbling now." "Whatever, it's fine as long as I understand it in my heart. This time, I don't need to go to Huaxia. I want to follow you every day and integrate into your life." And made up her mind. "Our relationship is developing so fast. I wasn't sure before, but now I'm sure that I like you. There are also other people who are eyeing you covetously. Of course I can't let my guard down." And said with a set of words. Tang Zheng shook his head and didn't say anything. Annie was determined to chase after him. This was something that would make many men elated, but he felt a great deal of pressure. This time when they went back, the others wouldn't be as easy to talk to as Mu Hongyan. He didn't know if it would lead to a war between these women. In such a big villa, he was afraid that there would be a fight every day. Just thinking about it made his heart tremble. And talked non-stop all the way, and Tang Zheng was a quiet listener. When the plane finally landed, he looked at the familiar sky of Beijing and let out a sigh of relief. The summer in Beijing was very hot, and people felt like they were being roasted by the sun. Some time ago, the storm in the imperial city had calmed down. Beijing was peaceful again, and people were rushing to make a living. After Tang Zheng and the other two returned to the villa, the girls were in high spirits, but the happiness didn't last long. Because Anne quietly moved her luggage from upstairs to the first floor next to Tang Zheng's. This action made everyone subconsciously stop what they were doing and look at her strangely. Seeing everyone looking at her, Anne calmly explained, "It's too tiring to climb up and down every day, so I live on the first floor." No one believed this lame excuse, and everyone looked at her and Tang Zheng a few more times. Tang Zheng looked down, as if saying it had nothing to do with him. But the girls couldn't think that it had nothing to do with them, especially Fang Shishir and Yi Dingdang. During this period of time, the relationship between the two had advanced by leaps and bounds, as if they had formed some kind of alliance. They went out together, and occasionally went shopping together. This was a situation that Tang Zheng had never expected. Yi Dingdang seemed to have changed into a different person, which made him puzzled. When Anne moved her luggage into the house, Tang Zheng was immediately surrounded by Yi Dingdang and Fang Shishir. Wu and Lu Qingmei also wanted to surround him, but in the end, they restrained themselves. "What's going on?" Yi Dingdang asked straightforwardly. Tang Zheng innocently said, "How would I know?" "If you don't know, then who should know?" Yi Dingdang asked, "You went to her country, and then came back, she moved next door to you. Isn't that obvious?" Tang Zheng pretended to be at a loss and shook his head. "Didn't she say that she didn't want to climb up and down? Is this reason sufficient?" Fang Shishir finally couldn't help but ask. Although she tolerated Tang Zheng, she couldn't remain indifferent when she saw that and had signs of getting involved. It was a simple question. Tang Zheng really wanted to bite the bullet and say that it was sufficient, but in the end, he didn't say it out loud. He bitterly smiled. "How would I know?" "Sure, isn't it obvious?" It must be because the two of them were alone abroad and sparks flew between them. Yi Dingdang's fiery personality was clearly displayed as she spoke without thinking. "Absolutely not." Tang Zheng hurriedly denied as he felt wronged. It's clearly sophistry." Sure, we can't spoil him like this. Otherwise, who knows what he'll do in the future. We must guard against him." Yi Dingdang said. Fang Shishir hesitated for a moment before nodding her head. "Sure, why are you also like this?" Tang Zheng wanted to cry but had no tears. "Don't take your anger out on Shishir. This is your fault." Seeing Tang Zheng being besieged again and again, Lan Yu couldn't bear to watch any longer and said, "Maybe there's a misunderstanding. He's had a hard time, so let him rest first." Seeing Lan Yu say this, the two didn't pursue the matter any further. After all, they had to give their future mother-in-law face. Lan Yu kindly looked at Tang Zheng and said, "Little Zheng, you go rest first." Tang Zheng gratefully looked at her and hurriedly slipped back into his room. And tidied up and came out, but she didn't see Tang Zheng's figure. She was about to knock on the door when Yi Dingdang rushed to stop her and asked, "Just what is your relationship with him?" And smiled and said, "I like him, so I want to pursue him." "What, you want to pursue him?" Everyone was shocked by her sonorous declaration of love. "What's wrong with that?" Annie asked. "Of course not." Fang Shishir, Yi Dingdang, and Wu Du said at the same time. Lu Qingmei also said the same thing in her heart. Chapter 931. The few of them glared at Annie and asked, "Have you asked for our opinion if you want to pursue him? We are his girlfriends. Can't I pursue him if he has a girlfriend? Of course I have to fight for my own happiness." Anne retorted. "You." Yi Dingdang wanted to call her shameless, but she didn't say it out loud. After a while, she said, "You have no part in it." And was confident and smiled sweetly, "That might not be the case. Don't think that we won't do anything to you just because you're a princess." Yi Dingdang said angrily. I've never thought of using my identity as a princess to pursue him. I'm just an ordinary girl who likes him. Yi Dingdang was about to flip out when she was stopped by Fang Shishir. If it was anyone else, they definitely wouldn't be able to stop Yi Dingdang, but for some reason, she could listen to Fang Shishir. Fang Shishir slowly shook her head. There's no need. Tang Zheng isn't someone who can be pursued by just anyone. In fact, she understood Tang Zheng the best. Even though she was a bit angry before, once she calmed down and saw Tang Zheng's reaction, she gradually understood. Annie's actions were to cut off the head and pick on the hot head, but Tang Zheng was clearly rejecting her, so at this time, she was being overbearing. She had a plan. If Tang Zheng knew what she was thinking, he would definitely give her a thumbs up. What a smart girl. Since Fang Shishir said so, the others didn't do anything to stop Anne. Tang Zheng spent the next few days in torment. Being sandwiched between too many women wasn't a happy thing. If he wasn't careful, he would lose sight of one and offend another. He would be scolded. He had been deliberately avoiding Anne, but Anne was like Sherlock Holmes. No matter where Tang Zheng hid, she could always find him. Fortunately, the Yen family and Qin Padian often came to visit him, giving him an excuse to send Anne away. Many things had happened in the capital while he was away. The imperial city was still under tight lockdown. This once world-class tourist attraction had become a restricted military zone. Even the Yen family's spies were unable to enter. However, it was speculated that the authorities had not given up yet. They wanted to dig 3 feet into the ground to find the 5-clawed golden dragon. When Tang Zheng heard this, he shook his head and smiled indifferently. Let them do their useless work. However, there was another piece of news that Tang Zheng did not expect. The Ye family had actually received strong support from the government and was developing vigorously throughout the country. Yen Padian sighed and said that this was the opportunity that Yi Xuanji had been looking forward to. The other party would definitely seize this opportunity firmly. Tang Zheng shrugged his shoulders as he did not mind. The Yi family allied with the government, so what could they do? Society had undergone a huge change. Without the support of a true expert, the rise of a family was like a castle in the air. It could easily collapse. However, Yen Padian was a little serious. He said that he still had to pay more attention to the Ye family, as Yi Xuanji was not an ordinary person. Tang Zheng laughed it off. Yen Padian and Qin Batian asked about the gains of Tang Zheng's trip to Europe. Tang Zheng gave a simple introduction, and the two of them were completely shocked. The way they looked at Tang Zheng was extremely complicated. This was an achievement that many people could not even dream of, but it was completed by Tang Zheng with just a raise of his hand. Only now did they understand why Tang Zheng did not put the Yi family in his eyes at all. The difference in vision between the two sides was like heaven and earth. Tang Zheng repeatedly warned them not to tell anyone, and they all understood tacitly. On this day, the weather was clear. The arrival of a group of people broke the silence of the villa. This group of people had different styles, and there were old, young, and young people. Tang Zheng stood at the door to welcome them. His gaze was complicated, especially when it landed on one of them, Wu Junshan, his biological father. Wu Junshan also looked at him, filled with mixed feelings. Tang Zheng nodded slightly, which could be considered as a greeting, and then shifted his gaze to the others. The witch clan elder brought a few elites from the clan. This time, he had asked the witch clan elder to come here with a mission. Because within here, he could not rashly take out the spar and let everyone absorb the energy to cultivate. That would be a confession without a fight. He was prepared to let the witch clan elder bring the spar back to the island. The so-called sacred ground was naturally built on the island, and that was his base. In addition, the summer vacation had already begun. He was prepared to let Fang Shishir, Lu Qingmei, and the others go to the island in the name of a vacation to secretly cultivate. This way, he could avoid Anne. The spar was of great importance, unless it was the witch clan elder escorting it, he would not be at ease. Moreover, the witch clan elder had repeatedly requested to see him, so he allowed it. When the elders and clansmen saw Tang Zheng, they were extremely excited. They all stepped forward and bowed, calling out to Lord Envoy. Tang Zheng looked at them with gratification. This group of witch clan people had already firmly merged with him. Even if Qi Yu was revived, he might not be able to control them. Elder, and the brothers of the witch clan, it's been a long journey. Everyone shook their heads. It's not hard. Hearing the envoy's summons, we are excited. We all want to be like Ah Yuan, able to help the envoy, and not stay on the island to live a comfortable life. Yi Yuan brought a group of clansmen to travel around the country to protect Tang Linger. Life on the island is not comfortable, but a kind of preparation. When everyone is ready, I naturally look forward to everyone coming back to help me. Tang Zheng said. The witch clan members that returned this time were at least fasting. The witch clan members had cultivated the chaotic Vajra spell and the god-slaying scroll, and their cultivation had advanced at a rapid pace. The witch clan was indeed worthy of being Qi Yu's old subordinates. Many people could not compare to their bloodline. Cultivation talent was hidden in his bloodline. Once it was activated, the potential that would erupt would be extremely dazzling. Yes, Lord Envoy. Everyone nodded. Wu Junshan was not surprised. He could see the admiration and respect that the witch clan members had for Tang Zheng from the bottom of their hearts during his daily life on the island. Tang Zheng's words were like an imperial edict. At the same time that he was gratified, he couldn't help but sigh with emotion. After operating in the martial sect for so many years, he had indeed subdued a portion of his trusted aides. However, even more people were disloyal to him, and in the end, even became his enemy. The new generation overtook the old, and that was it. The witch clan members did not all live in the villa. Instead, they were arranged to live in some of the surrounding buildings. That was their residence. The villa had been attacked a few times, making Tang Zheng more and more aware of the importance of safety. This was his home, and he had to protect it in all aspects. He could not trust others, so arranging for the witch clan members to protect the villa was the safest method. The witch clan was also very happy to do this. Protecting the envoy's home was a great honor. Back then, when they were on the island, the competition for this opportunity could be said to be extremely intense. The witch clan elder and Wu Junshan entered the villa. Lan Yu and Wu Junshan looked at each other. Lan Yu nodded lightly with a trace of a smile on her lips. Wu Junshan's heart moved. He understood what his wife meant. She was saying that her relationship with Tang Zheng had improved. He was also very happy. It was a long and difficult road to win back Tang Zheng's respect, but he had to do it. However, looking at the room full of women, Wu Junshan slapped his forehead. He felt a headache coming on. Although he had heard of it, seeing it with his own eyes still shocked him. It was as if the most beautiful women in the world lived here. His son was much stronger than him in this aspect. He could not even handle a wife. He did not know how this kid dealt with women. As someone who had experienced it before, although it was his first time seeing these women, he did not think that they were really pure friends with Tang Zheng. As a man, he knew this too well. The elder was not surprised. Even in ancient times, it was normal to have 3 wives and 4 concubines. He felt that it was natural for the strong to have more than one woman. However, it was the first time most of the women in the room had seen the 2 of them. They all opened their eyes wide in curiosity, especially when they found out that Wu Junshan was Tang Zheng's father. And had a bright idea and actually personally poured tea for him, causing the other girls to clench their teeth. This princess was indeed cunning, to think of a bribe so quickly. Wu Junshan accepted it calmly. The other party's princess identity did not have much of a halo to him. His attention was mostly on Wu. Wu Junshan obediently went forward and bowed. Wu Junshan looked at her with approval. His cultivation had improved greatly. Seeing that everyone had arrived, Tang Zheng went straight to the point and said, "I want to announce something. Shishir and Dingdang are already on summer vacation, so it's not good to stay at home, so why don't we go out and see the outside world? In addition, Teacher Lu has been working very hard during this period of time, so we'll go on vacation with the two of them. I will arrange for the elders to accompany you and protect your safety." When these words were spoken, everyone looked at each other in dismay. This was because to most people, this was a sudden attack and they did not know about it beforehand. "Why did you send us away?" Yi Dingdang keenly noticed the key point and suspiciously looked at Tang Zheng and Anne. "Don't let your imagination run wild. I have business to do." "What business is there that you can't tell us?" Yi Dingdang asked. The so-called business was that he was preparing to make a trip to the Azure Dragon Palace. Moreover, he was not alone, but gathered many people. Empyrean Fairy had to go, Tian Chanzi also had to go, Lan Yu and Wu were duty-bound, and as for Wu Junshan, when he heard the news, he rushed back even though he was far away. They were originally from the martial organization and were inextricably linked to the Azure Dragon Palace. They wanted to settle things with the Azure Dragon Palace, and this was something that Tang Zheng had no reason to stop. Once these people left, the villa's defensive power would be empty. Tang Zheng did not feel at ease leaving everyone behind. Of course, he did not want to tell them the truth, fearing that they would be worried. Seeing Yi Dingdang aggressively ask, Tang Zheng wished that he could pick her up and spank her. She was becoming more and more arrogant. Although he had been back for a few days, there were too many people around, so he did not have a chance to be alone with her. Otherwise, he would definitely take care of her. Seeing that Tang Zheng could not answer, Yi Dingdang suddenly realized and said, "I understand. You must want to send us away so that you can be with her." Cough cough. Tang Zheng almost choked to death on his saliva. What did this have to do with Anne? Anne's eyes lit up when she heard this. She looked at Tang Zheng in surprise and happily said, "What's wrong with that? Men should be given freedom. If you keep controlling them, then they will never grow up. Of course you want it to be like this. You're still pretending to be obedient." Yi Dingdang ridiculed. "You must go on vacation. There is no room for discussion." Tang Zheng stared and said unquestionably. Chapter 932. Looking at the stubborn Yi Dingdang, Tang Zheng felt a headache coming on. However, she was not a cultivator, so it did not matter if she did not go to the island. Since that was the case, he would let her be. The corners of Yi Dingdang's mouth curled up into a smile as she coldly looked at Annie, as if to say that she was staring at her. And shrugged her shoulders. It did not matter, it was always a good thing to have one less competitor by her side. "What about them?" Fang Shishir pointed at Wu and the others and asked curiously. "They still have other things to do, so there's no time to lose. They will leave tomorrow." "So anxious?" Fang Shishir was surprised. "Yes, summer vacation is not long. If we leave early, we can play for a few more days." Although everyone had many questions in their hearts, if Tang Zheng did not say anything, no one could force him. "Brother, what about me?" Nana tugged at the corner of Tang Zheng's clothes. "Nana also wants to go out and play." Tang Zheng looked at Empyrean Fairy, and seeing her nod, he carried her and smiled affectionately. "Of course you will go too." Nana immediately clapped her hands and said excitedly, "That's great, Nana also wants to go out and play, but it would be good if Big Brother came with me." "If you stick to Big Brother all day, you won't grow up." Nana thought for a while, then firmly shook her head. "No, Nana wants to grow up and become as beautiful as Big Sister and the others." Tang Zheng laughed out loud, and called the clan elder into the study room alone. The two of them talked for a long time, and the clan elder reported to him in detail about the situation on the island. When he heard that there were many new babies born in the witch clan, Tang Zheng was pleasantly surprised. These babies were not comparable to the current adult witch clan. These babies were the new blood, the future of the witch clan. They could cultivate from a young age, so their future achievements would definitely be greater than the current witch clan. When the clan elder heard Tang Zheng introduce the spar, he was overjoyed and said excitedly, "If we have this spar, then our clansmen's cultivation will be faster, and we will be able to achieve twice the result with half the effort." "Crystals are very important," so they must be closely guarded, do you understand? Understood. The elder nodded heavily. However, there is another life form in this crystal stone. Even though I don't know what it is definitely alive. When we cultivate, the crystal stone will become transparent and everyone will see it. We must be careful because there will be a day when the crystal stone will be completely absorbed and the life form will be released. Tang Zheng solemnly warned. The elder said without hesitation, Sir Envoy, rest assured. Our entire clan will be on guard. If the creature from beyond the heavens comes out, we will definitely capture it alive. No, don't capture it alive. Inform me when it's about to break free. I want to deal with it personally, Tang Zheng said. Although the elder felt that he was making a mountain out of a molehill, he still agreed without hesitation. Sure and Sister May still don't know about this. When the time comes, you will tell them. Their cultivation is not as good as yours, Elder, so you have to guide them more. Elder, don't worry. I will pass on all my cultivation experiences to them. It's just that the island is remote. I don't know if they have the habit of living here. The elder said worriedly. Tang Zheng smiled faintly and said that they were not young misses of rich families, so there was no need to worry about this. That night, everyone in the house sat at a large table to eat. It seemed to be happy and harmonious, but in fact, there was an undercurrent surging. Tang Zheng and Lan Yu's relationship was much more harmonious, but with Wu Junshan, he was still cold. Yi Dingdang and were fighting openly and secretly. A meal was like a war. In the middle of the night, a person secretly sneaked into Tang Zheng's room. It was actually the reserved Fang Shishir. She was about to leave, so she finally put aside her shyness and cherished this rare moment with Tang Zheng. The two fought to their heart's content for most of the night before falling asleep. And, who was next door, did not sleep for most of the night. Although the soundproofing of the room was good, a woman's sixth sense still sensed that there must be another woman lying on Tang Zheng's bed next door. Of course, she was jealous in her heart, but there was nothing she could do. She silently comforted herself that if she persevered, the one lying on the bed would definitely be her. The next day, when the sky was bright, Tang Zheng and Fang Shishir walked out together. Under everyone's gaze, although Fang Shishir was shy, her hand was tightly held by Tang Zheng. She could not escape at all, but she was very happy. This was the two of them openly showing their love, which was a treatment that no one else had ever received. The other women's eyes were burning, wishing that they could replace Fang Shishir. The witch clan elder took a look and left with the crystal stone. The crystal stone was taken out from Sumeru world. The witch clan elder did not have a heaven-level magic treasure storage bag, so he could only quietly put the crystal stone on a truck and drive it to the sea. He had already arranged for a ship to bring the crystal stone to the island. When everyone reluctantly left, Tang Zheng and the others were also ready to leave. At this time, Anne knew that Tang Zheng did not want to stay behind to accompany her, but also wanted to leave. She wanted to chase after him, but was rejected by Tang Zheng without hesitation. Yi Dingdang was immediately overjoyed, so Tang Zheng did not want to be together with Anne, she had wronged him. Tang Zheng, Empyrean Fairy, Tian Chanzi, Wu Junshan, Lan Yu, Wu Wu, and Li Xiaotian sat in two cars and directly drove out of the capital. But just as they left the capital, the number of cars decreased, and they realized that there was a tail following behind them. It was actually Anne. Tang Zheng did not know whether to laugh or cry. Anne had really put in a lot of effort, but this time it was too dangerous, so of course he could not bring her along. Thus, Tang Zheng forcefully sent her back and let Yi Dingdang watch over her. Only then could he leave alone. As for Yi Dingdang and making a ruckus at home, Tang Zheng did not care. In any case, the two of them were evenly matched, so neither of them would be at a disadvantage. 3 days later, everyone arrived at the foot of the mountain where the Azure Dragon Palace was located. The road had long since disappeared, and they had been walking for nearly half a day. The Azure Dragon Palace was hidden in such a deserted place, no wonder no one could discover it. Li Xiaotian stared blankly at the mountain in front of her. Along the way, she had many questions. Although she had lost her memories, her intelligence had not decreased in the slightest. These days, she had already discovered many clues. When others faced her, they were especially unnatural. Especially at the very beginning, there was even a hint of hostility mixed in. After such a long time of integration, this hostility gradually weakened. Although she wanted to integrate into this big family, there was always a feeling of being out of place in her heart. She gradually understood that before she lost her memories, she must have been at odds with everyone. Perhaps she was a big bad person. This thought gave her a fright. She had never thought of herself as a bad person. She was kind-hearted, and the thing she wanted to do most was to help others. This time, she saw Tang Jing deliberately send away his confidants and bring her along. How could she not be surprised? She guessed that this might have something to do with her identity. What was her identity? She had silently asked herself many times, but there was no answer. She hoped to find the answer, but she was also somewhat afraid. If unfortunately, she guessed correctly, she was a bad person, then what should she do? She looked at her hands. If these hands had killed someone and were covered in blood. She clutched her head, not daring to continue thinking. Seeing her reaction, Tang Zheng was shocked. Now he was sure that she had completely lost her memories under the influence of the soul-searching technique, and was not pretending. What's wrong with you? Li Xiaotian suddenly raised her head and asked, what are we doing here? There is a group of bad people here. They have harmed many people, so we need to deal with them. Tang Zheng said implicitly. Who is that? Li Xiaotian looked at him with burning eyes and asked. Azure Dragon Palace. Li Xiaotian's eyes were blank. She shook her head and said that she had never heard of these 3 words. It doesn't matter if you haven't heard of it. Since you are here to deal with bad people, why did you bring me along? I don't know martial arts. Moreover, I don't want to fight. Although she had once saved a little girl who was almost killed by a car, she still did not know that she knew martial arts. Her usual behavior was no different from ordinary people. Tang Zheng was silent. He did not know how to answer. Seeing his reaction, Li Xiaotian suddenly realized something. Her expression became very depressed. She nervously asked, am I a person from the Azure Dragon Palace? Ah. Tang Zheng's eyelids fiercely jumped. He was surprised that her guess was so accurate. She was still so smart. How should he answer this? You don't need to answer. I already know the answer. I also finally understand why they were always on guard against me. They were hostile. So I really was a bad person in the past. Li Xiaotian miserably said. She looked as if she had lost her soul. Tang Zheng had never seen such pain on her face. She looked as if she had lost her soul. It was as if her spirit had been sucked away in an instant. Tang Zheng could not help but blame himself. Was he too cruel? He had already obtained information from her. Why did he have to bring her here? This was to open up her scars and then sprinkle a handful of salt on it. No matter how many bad things she had done in the past, from this moment on, Tang Zheng no longer resented her. This was because he hated the old Li Xiaotian. Now, she was a brand new Li Xiaotian. A true new life. Don't be sad. That is not the current you. You are now a good person. Tang Zheng's comforting words were somewhat weak. But I was bad before. Li Xiaotian said, did I kill people before? Tang Zheng did not lie and nodded lightly. Li Xiaotian burst into tears and squatted on the ground. This was out of everyone's expectations, especially Wu. She had always had a huge opinion of Li Xiaotian and always thought that Li Xiaotian was pretending to lose her memories. But at this moment, seeing Li Xiaotian's reaction, this belief was shaken. Could it be that she had really changed? Wu was not a petty person. When she confirmed that Li Xiaotian had really changed, the anger in her heart lessened by a lot. Looking at Li Xiaotian, she suddenly felt that he was a little pitiful. She bent down and gently patted Li Xiaotian's back, saying, "Don't be sad, what I hate is the past you. Actually, you are a good person now. Back then, your actions of saving that little girl had already moved me." "Really?" Li Xiaotian asked pitifully with tears streaming down her face. Wu nodded firmly. "Of course it's true." Chapter 933. Although Wu hated evil as if it was his enemy, he was still a magnanimous person. Seeing Li Xiaotian reveal his true feelings, he sincerely said those words. Li Xiaotian wiped away her tears, stood up and said, "Thank you, I'm much better now. Why don't you go home first?" Tang Zheng said softly. Li Xiaotian thought for a moment, then shook her head. "No, since I want to be a good person and break away from the past, then the best way is to face the past." Tang Zheng secretly praised, and said, "Then let's continue forward." This small episode did not really affect everyone's mood. On the contrary, because of Li Xiaotian's true feelings, everyone accepted her. Not long after, they arrived at a stream on the mountainside. A fisherman wearing a bamboo hat sat by the stream, holding a long bamboo fishing rod in his hand, with a straight hook hanging on the fishing line. In the clear stream, the fish circled around the empty hook, as if it was delicious and wanted to take a bite. "Elder Angler," Tang Zheng subconsciously called out. The fisherman did not even turn his head as he stared at the water, as if the fish were much more attractive than them. Wu Junshan and Lan Yu looked at the fisherman in shock. This person looked like an ordinary old man who was infatuated with the forest, but in reality, he was extremely deep. They could not see through him at all. The two of them looked at each other and read the meaning in each other's eyes. This fisherman was definitely a martial king. To them, the martial king realm was a realm that they yearned for, but it was not unreachable. Ever since they left the martial sect, the two of them had spent most of their time on the island, broadening their horizons and living with the witch clan every day. Although they were not cultivators, they had many things in common with cultivation. Their cultivation had also advanced by leaps and bounds, and they had already touched the threshold of the martial king realm, reaching the 9th level of the great master realm. Tang Zheng knew that the fisherman was one of the 3 great consecrators of the Azure Dragon Palace. His cultivation was even higher than that of the fair-faced flying dragon, so he had naturally reached the martial king realm. Seeing that the other party did not react, he walked up and arrived behind the fisherman. The muscles on Elder Angler's neck twitched slightly, but Tang Zheng still keenly noticed it. Tang Zheng's footsteps were very light and ordinary, but in Elder Angler's heart, these footsteps had already conveyed many things. The person who came was an expert. He finally turned his head slowly and his gaze fell on Tang Zheng's face. His eyes flickered as if he was trying to guess the other's identity. He did not know Tang Zheng. Although he was a consecrator of the Azure Dragon Hall, he spent most of his time fishing here, unlike fair-faced flying dragon who was involved in the affairs of the Azure Dragon Hall. He hadn't even seen Tang Zheng's photo before. However, his attention was quickly attracted by Li Xiaotian, and his pupils suddenly shrank. The news of Li Xiaotian's death had already been brought back by Song Yu, but why was she standing in front of him alive? How were these people related to her? Questions flashed through Elder Angler's mind, but when his gaze landed on Wu Junshan and Lan Yu, he could no longer conceal his shock. "It's you guys." He instantly knew who these people were because he recognized Wu Junshan and Lan Yu. Towards these two, even if he did not care about worldly affairs, he would definitely recognize them. "Li Xiaotian, you actually betrayed the Azure Dragon Hall, betrayed the High Lord," Elder Angler angrily said. Hearing him call out her name, Li Xiaotian became emotional and bit her lips. Tang Zheng blocked Elder Angler's gaze and said, "Don't blame me for bullying a girl. If you have anything to say, come at me." "You are Tang Zheng." Tang Zheng faintly smiled, tacitly agreeing. "You have guts, daring to come to the Azure Dragon Hall. Li Xiaotian submitted to you, could it be that she did not tell you how powerful the Azure Dragon Hall is?" Elder Angler stood up and glared at Tang Zheng like a tiger watching its prey. "The Azure Dragon Hall is powerful, but it is not invincible. Since you are a consecrator of the Azure Dragon Hall, I will first defeat you." With a tap of his finger, the battle soul sword flew out of thin air and slashed towards Elder Angler. Elder Angler's eyes flashed. He lightly shook his wrist and the fishing line flew towards Battle Spirit, wrapping around the sword in an attempt to stop its attack. Battle Spirit shone brightly, but it was unknown what material the fishing line was made of, but it actually did not break. However, Battle Spirit's attack did not decrease. Elder Angler hurriedly withdrew his move. The fishing line loosened and like a snake, it turned around and shot towards Tang Zheng like a dart. Break! Tang Zheng gave a low roar, and the Battle Soul Sword's attack changed direction, directly slashing at the fishing line. Clang! Like a zither string breaking, the fishing line finally broke into two, but the hook still shot towards Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng coldly snorted. He stretched out his hand and a small black hole appeared in his palm. The fishing hook flashed and disappeared into the black hole. Elder Angler's expression became especially cold. Tang Zheng's strength was high beyond his expectations. Moreover, with the help of others, he would not be able to resist at all. Immediately, he had the intention to retreat. However, Battle Spirit closed in step by step, not giving him the chance. In an instant, it appeared in front of him and slashed down. Hua! The air was like seawater, automatically splitting to two sides. A wave of oppressive sword chi rushed towards his face. He hurriedly dodged, but the fishing rod in his hand pointed towards Tang Zheng. An inch longer was an inch stronger, that was for ordinary people. Although the fishing rod was very long, this advantage did not exist for Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng slightly retreated, dodging the attack. However, he still controlled his sword to attack from afar. Pooh! A line of blood extended from Elder Angler's face all the way to his chin. A look of pain flashed in his old eyes. However, he was not cut in half because at the critical moment, he controlled the fishing rod to point at the ground. The fishing rod bent and he used the rebound force to fly backwards. Battle Spirit's sword only left a line of blood on his face and did not harm his life. He did not stop. The fishing rod tapped on the ground a few more times. Then, as if he was stepping on stilts, he quickly fled towards the top of the mountain. A cold light flashed in Tang Zheng's eyes. Battle Spirit's sword chased after him. Just as the other party was about to disappear into the forest, Battle Spirit's sword caught up with him. A flower of blood bloomed on his back. He fell into the forest and completely disappeared. Chase! Tang Zheng did not hesitate, he took the lead and chased towards the top of the mountain. The others were not willing to fall behind, but Li Xiaotian stood in place, not knowing what to do. She had forgotten how to use martial arts and how to increase her speed. Seeing this, Wu grabbed her hand and said, "Come with me." "Thank you." Li Xiaotian looked at her gratefully, allowing her to lead him as they chased towards the top of the mountain. When she got used to the speed, she gradually felt that her body's functions were completely activated. In the forest, other than the sound of the wind, there was only the sound of a few people rushing. The top of the mountain was in sight, and the pitch-black house came into view. Tang Zheng subconsciously slowed down his footsteps and reminded, "We have already reached the core area of the Azure Dragon Palace. Everyone, be careful." Everyone nodded in agreement. Finally, they stopped in front of the house and focused their gazes on it. There was still blood on the ground, disappearing behind the door. Tang Zheng shouted in a clear voice, "Elder Angler, Lord, could it be that you want to be a coward and not come out?" "Nonsense." With a creak, the door opened. The Elder Angler stood at the door with a pale face. He held onto the door frame with one hand, as if he could fall at any time. His entire body was wet from head to toe, but it was wet from blood. Furthermore, there were a few drops of blood hanging from the corner of his clothes. The Elder Angler said weakly, "Tang Zheng, you are courting death. Don't think that just because you defeated me, you will defeat the Azure Dragon Palace. Since you dare to say such words, then show me your methods." "I will wait and see," Tang Zheng said indifferently. Blood Guillotine, attack. The elder angler clenched his teeth and suddenly shouted at the top of his lungs. So. More than 10 blood guillotine flew out from the black house and swept over everyone's heads. Tang Zheng, Empyrean Fairy, and Tian Chanzi had already seen the power of the blood guillotine in the 100,000 Great Mountains. They did not completely let down their guard, but they also did not treat it as if they were facing a great enemy. However, the blood guillotine was used in conjunction with a formation. At this moment, the other party was in a hurry to meet the enemy and the formation was not completed. Tang Zheng took advantage of the situation to rise up, and with familiar ease, he controlled Battle's soul to meet a blood guillotine, directly chopping it to the ground. Tian Chanzi pointed his finger and a sharp sword chi also struck a blood guillotine. As for Empyrean Fairy, she did not even look at it. Wu Junshan and the others felt waves in their hearts. This was the power that the Azure Dragon Hall relied on. It was indeed extraordinary. They were not willing to fall behind and fought back. Suddenly, a few people jumped out from the black house. They were all master-level martial artists and were members of the blood guillotine. Seeing that their formation was disrupted by the other party before it was completed, they did not panic. Instead, they quickly fixed the formation's flaws and formed a complete formation. They attacked again, but the blood guillotines in the air became slippery like loaches. There was no way to attack. Empyrean Fairy finally did not remain indifferent. She coldly looked at the group and said, "You still want to use this thing to stop us? Some things can be done once, but not twice." With a thought, the stately mountain and river map flew into the air and a small hill descended from the stately mountain and river map. Everyone was shocked. Before they could react, they saw the top of their heads turn black. Boom! The entire mountain trembled as the small hill landed on top of the black house. All the blood guillotines were crushed under the small hill, not a single sound could be heard. Seeing her move, Wu Junshan and the others were shocked speechless. This was the power of a celestial. Compared to it, they were like babies. Tang Zheng was not surprised. The last time they faced the blood guillotines, they were restrained by the High Lord, so she could not use such a big move. This time, without the High Lord's restraint, the Empyrean Fairy used a big move right from the start. They could not resist at all. The Empyrean Fairy waved her hand and coldly snorted. Not far away, the angler looked at this scene with a pale face. Fortunately, he acted according to the situation and escaped in time. Otherwise, he would have been crushed by the small hill. Chapter 934. The heavens and earth were silent, as if even the wind had sensed the danger and took a detour. Suddenly, the hill began to shake. Everyone's expression changed as they subconsciously cried out. The Empyrean Fairy's eyes narrowed as she looked at this scene suspiciously. Boom! With a loud explosion, the hill exploded, turning into large rocks that flew in all directions. Everyone was hit by the rocks and hurriedly used their cultivation to block them. When the rocks dissipated, they discovered that there was a person standing in the ruins. High Lord. He was wearing a mask and his cold gaze swept over everyone as he said, "You actually found this place." This was the first time that Wu Junshan and Lan Yu had seen a High Lord. Their expressions kept changing. This High Lord had deceived everyone and secretly controlled the martial sect. This was a great humiliation to Wu Junshan. That was why he took the initiative to come and settle this matter. At this moment, looking at the High Lord, he wanted nothing more than to charge forward and fight to the death. "High Lord, it's Li Xiaotian who betrayed us." Elder Angler hurriedly explained. "So she didn't die, but betrayed us." The High Lord's gaze turned and stabbed Li Xiaotian's chest like a sharp knife. Immediately, she felt a strong sense of suffocation and her face became pale, but she gritted her teeth and held on. She righteously said, "I didn't betray you, I just turned from the dark to the light. You are a bad person and I am a good person." Good person? The High Lord ruminated on these two words and looked at her as if he didn't recognize her. He said, "You still want to be a good person?" "Of course." Li Xiaotian proudly raised her neck. The High Lord stared at her and suddenly said in a shocking voice, "You are not Li Xiaotian." He understood the original Li Xiaotian very well. That was a woman who would do anything to achieve her goals. How could she say that she wanted to be a good person? She should be the one who said that good people don't live long. Li Xiaotian didn't back down. Instead, he said directly, "Of course I'm not the Li Xiaotian you knew. That Li Xiaotian is already dead. This is my new life." Freshman. The High Lord repeated this absurd word. "Tang Zheng, how did you do it? She was actually brainwashed by you just like that?" The corners of Tang Zheng's mouth curled up into a smile. It wasn't easy to shock a High Lord like this. People tend to be kind. This is the law of nature and also the most basic human nature. She is a kind person deep down in her heart. It's only because you guys instilled too many wrong ideas that she went astray and became what she was in the past. Now, she has already left behind her past and is a brand new self. Tang Zheng said tirelessly. The Great Lord snorted in disdain. "No matter how you did it, since she's already standing on the opposite side of me, I won't let her leave alive." "Do you think you have the right to say that?" "I found your Azure Dragon Hall's lair." "I won't let you leave alive," Tang Zheng retorted. "Humph, you won last time, but it doesn't mean that you'll win this time." The Great Lord's voice was powerful and full of confidence. "Then we'll know once we try." The Empyrean Fairy spoke first. She was still brooding over the loss last time. This time, she wanted to give the Great Lord a fatal blow. The Empyrean Fairy cast a spell. The mountain river map flew directly above the Great Lord's head. A powerful aura spread out from the mountain river map. The Great Lord's expression was normal. His fingers flipped and quickly formed a hand seal. At the same time, he slowly opened his mouth and spat out a syllable. Hum. This syllable sounded in the world, stirring up the world and reverberating in people's hearts. Everyone was shocked. Tang Zheng, the Empyrean Fairy, and Tian Chanzi had seen the Great Lord's non-phase method. But from the first syllable, they had already judged that the Great Lord's power had greatly increased. The power of this syllable was already very terrifying. Boom, this syllable was like the most powerful gale between heaven and earth. It swept across the top of the mountain. In an instant, the ruins and rocks exploded. Hum. The second syllable came out of his mouth. It was more natural and majestic. Hum. 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 5 syllables came out of his throat in one breath. His chest, abdomen, and vocal cords resonated. After he spat out these 5 syllables, everyone felt a great pressure as expected. He spoke too fast. After the 5 syllables were uttered in an instant, the atmosphere between heaven and earth changed. Everyone felt suppressed by the terrible force falling from the sky and couldn't move at all. My mistake. This time, I should have brought Linga with me. Because only her mind is pure and undistracted, she can avoid this pervasive non-phase method. Tang Zheng couldn't help but regret. As soon as the 5 syllables came out, everyone seemed to have fallen into glue. Their movements became very slow, and the air seemed to have become incomparably sticky. Tang Zheng secretly felt bad. When he was about to fight back, he heard the Empyrean Fairy shout, "Break!" The mountain river map shone brightly. Black things spewed out from the mountain river map. A monstrous flood washed down, as if it was going to directly break the Great Lord into pieces. At this time, the Great Lord opened his mouth again. A word penetrated layers of obstacles between his chest and abdomen and burst out from his throat. Hum. He had completely mastered the 6 words of the non-phase method. As soon as the 6th syllable came out, the atmosphere between heaven and earth changed dramatically, and the flood from the sky stopped. Time and space froze at this moment. Everyone had turned into puppets. However, the Great Lord's eyes fluctuated very fiercely. Obviously, this 6th word was something that he had just cultivated and was not proficient in. Moreover, using the non-phase method and spitting out the 6 words of the proverb consumed a lot of energy and mind. When he spat out the 6 words of the proverb, he must be undistracted. Therefore, when he restricted the opponent, he was also restricted and had no power to protect himself. However, the non-phase method attacked indiscriminately. As long as it was within the range of the 6 words of the proverb, as long as anyone had murderous intent, it would be difficult to escape and could not break through. In particular, he had spat out the 6th word. The power was even more incomparable. It was much more powerful than when he was in the 100,000 mountains. When Tang Zheng and the others heard the 6th voice, they immediately knew that the situation was not good. They looked at the monstrous flood suspended above the great lord's head. It was as if it was frozen, motionless. This scene almost caused them to collapse, but they had no other choice. They could only watch all of this happen, because they couldn't even move a finger. Tang Zheng crazily operated his power, trying to break through this imprisonment, but he found that the non-phase method was really strange. The more anxious he was, the heavier his murderous intent, and the more he felt that there was a powerful force around him that was shrinking and squeezing his body, as if it wanted to crush him. This was the power of the non-phase method breaking through to the 6th level. The first 5 levels corresponded to the 5 syllables. Although it could affect people's actions, it had no real lethality and had to rely on external objects to attack. The flying guillotine came into being and made up for this flaw. But when the non-phase method broke through to the 6th level, the 6th syllable could be completely spoken, and the non-phase method was achieved. This was not only to imprison others, but also to attack the other party. The attacked person would feel that there was an increasingly large and terrifying force squeezing their body from all directions. When the body finally could not resist this force, they would die. Even without the flying guillotine, it could still kill people in a flash. The Empyrean fairy's face became pale, and she bitterly said, "The non-phase method is so powerful, I miscalculated." Wu Junshan and Lan Yu looked at each other and firmly said, "Even if we die, we must escape. We must not let him catch us all in one fell swoop. Little Zhen cannot have any accident." The two desperately operated their power, trying to offset this force, but it was completely futile. It was like a rope around their neck, the more they struggled, the tighter it became. In the end, they could not escape the fate of being strangled. Elder Angler was ecstatic to see this scene. Of course, he was clear about the power of the non-phase method. However, he did not expect that the Great Lord would come out of seclusion and actually reach such a level. He had truly cultivated the non-phase method. Who told you to be arrogant? With the Great Lord here, no one can overthrow the Azure Dragon Hall. Elder Angler happily said. Tang Zheng unwillingly opened his eyes wide. He originally thought that with so many people, there would be a way to break the situation. Moreover, he had summed up the experience with the Empyrean fairy in advance and discussed countermeasures. In the end, they determined that although they relied on Ling to break the situation last time, that was the first time they faced the non-phase method. This time, even if there was no Ling they would absolutely not repeat the same mistake and let the Great Lord succeed. Because as long as they struck first, there would be a glimmer of hope. However, they never thought that the Great Lord would actually completely cultivate the non-phase method. When the 6 words were used, the power was much greater than expected. For a while, they fell into the same predicament twice, and it was even more dangerous. The power created by the 6 words was absolutely not easy for them to break, so what should they do? The pressure on his body was getting bigger and bigger, as if his body was being squeezed by the power from all directions. Suddenly, Tang Zheng felt that there was movement around him. A person gently lifted his foot and took a step forward. What the hell? Tang Zheng ran past 10,000 alpacas in the play, but he could not move and could not see clearly what was happening around him. Who was this person who took a step forward? One must know that this was within the attack range of the non-phase method. Even the Empyrean fairy, a master in the deity stage, could not escape, let alone other people. Could it be that this voice came from another supermaster? No. Tang Zheng subconsciously denied. Listening to this voice, it seemed that this person had been standing beside them, indicating that they were together. He silently counted one by one, but could not think of anyone who could have this ability. Chapter 935. Finally, Tang Zheng saw the person who came out. Li Xiaotian. The others also saw her, and it was incredible. How could she be safe and sound? Wasn't she full of murderous intent before? Tang Zheng thought quickly and suddenly realized, Li Xiaotian lost her memory and was reborn. The murderous intent in her heart disappeared, and she became as pure and kind as a baby. This was the same as Linger, so she could not be affected by the non-phase method. Li Xiaotian looked at herself in surprise, and then looked at the others. She did not know why she could move freely and was not affected. The others looked at her in shock, especially the Lord and the dangling fisher. They knew her very well. In any case, she might have this ability. But everything in front of them made them believe how wrong their judgment was. Empyrean Fairy and the others, like Tang Zheng, immediately understood the reason, and their eyes were filled with joy. It was really a pleasant surprise to bring her here this time. Tang Zheng chose to forgive her, but he did not expect that now it would produce such an unexpected result. The deadlock of certain death was broken. Tang Zheng could not wait to shout, Li Xiaotian, go and attack the Lord. His non-phase method will naturally lose its power. Li Xiaotian bit her lips and hesitated. Tang Zheng thought she was worried about her safety and was afraid of the Lord's counterattack. He quickly explained, don't worry, he is now a toothless tiger. He can't jump and threaten you. Li Xiaotian shook her head slightly. I'm not worried about my safety. I just want to ask him why he wants me to become a bad person like before. The sadness and frustration in her words made people feel like their hearts were being twisted by a knife. Li Xiaotian, from the day your master picked you up, your life belongs to the Azure Dragon Hall. What kind of person you want to become, of course, is up to me. There is no reason. The Lord said bluntly. Li Xiaotian's tears fell from the corner of her eyes. Have you never considered my feelings? What do you feel? The only thing you have to do is follow my orders. Li Xiaotian, if you turn back now and kill those people, I can spare your life. Otherwise, your fate will be the same as theirs. You will die without a burial ground. The great lord's tone was still unyielding. No. Li Xiaotian suddenly let out a heart-wrenching roar. You have no right to decide my life. That's not the life I want. The great lord's eyes became very sharp as he stared at her. Suddenly, he had an idea and said, you lost your memory, right? Tang Zheng's head trembled. The High Lord was indeed very powerful. He had actually seen through the clues. Li Xiaotian coldly said, I have lost my memories. That memory was the darkest moment of my life. To be able to remove it from my mind is my greatest fortune. I see. I finally understand. Tang Zheng, you really have a good method. You actually used this kind of method to make her betray me. Tang Zheng coldly snorted and said, a just cause enjoys abundant support while an unjust cause finds little support. Everyone has a scale in their heart. Let them go. Otherwise, I won't be polite. Li Xiaotian threatened. Do you have the guts to deal with me? The great lord's aura was very strong. He could see an intense fear and timidity in Li Xiaotian's eyes. This was no longer the decisive killing her from before. Li Xiaotian, don't be afraid of him. He's just bluffing. He can't hurt you. Tang Zheng hurriedly reminded her. He was deeply afraid that she would be scared by the other. I'm not afraid of him. Li Xiaotian shook her head. The fear in her eyes gradually disappeared. Instead, it became very firm. She walked step by step towards the Great Lord. A trace of panic flashed in the depths of the Great Lord's eyes. He bluffed and said, stop. Do you want to die? I've already died once. How could I be afraid of death? Li Xiaotian looked very indifferent. She finally walked in front of the Great Lord. The Great Lord could not hide his panic. He watched as she stretched out 2 fingers and poked his eyes. This action did not have the slightest murderous intent. It was as if she was taking a stroll. It was exactly this action that did not trigger the slightest attack from the non-phase method. Li Xiaotian did not use martial arts, but if those 2 delicate fingers were inserted into the Great Lord's eyes, his pair of eyes would certainly be difficult to protect. Finally, the Great Lord could not stand it anymore. He shouted, "I'll kill you." In order to save his life, he had to give up the non-phase method. In an instant, everyone regained their ability to move. The Great Lord attacked Li Xiaotian, intending to kill her directly. "Stop!" Tang Zheng had already expected the Great Lord's reaction. As soon as he regained his freedom, the shooting sun arrow flew out like lightning. The Great Lord's hand was about to hit Li Xiaotian's head when the shooting sun arrow arrived in front of his face. If he insisted on killing Li Xiaotian, then he would also die without a doubt. The Great Lord's eyes flashed with a strong unwillingness. He had no choice but to retreat. The shooting sun arrow flew past his cheek. Boom! The shooting sun arrow shot into the distant mountain rocks and the rocks were torn apart. At the same time, Tang Zheng came to Li Xiaotian's side. He took her in his arms and flew back. The Great Lord roared, "Tang Zheng, I'll kill you." Tang Zheng sneered, "Let's see who will kill who." "Wu, you protect her." Letting go of Li Xiaotian, he turned around and rushed toward the Great Lord. In an instant, the 2 people fought. The sky darkened, sand and stones flew, and it was abnormally terrifying. Tang Zheng was a first-grade Yuanying cultivator, but after the Great Lord went into seclusion this time, not only did he recuperate from his injuries, his cultivation had also increased greatly, and he had already reached the 9th grade martial king. Amongst the warriors in the past 100 years, there was no doubt that he was the one with the highest cultivation. Compared to him, Tang Zheng was also much weaker. It was just that the Great Lord's non-phase method was forced to be helpless and could not be used, so his fighting strength was greatly reduced. Furthermore, Tang Zheng had the War Soul Sword, Heaven-Shocking Bow, and Shooting Sun Arrow, so his fighting strength naturally increased greatly. For a moment, the 2 of them were unable to determine the victor. However, this was only a matter of time, because Tang Zheng was not a match for the Great Lord in the end. The Great Lord finally found a flaw and struck Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng flew backwards and spat out blood. He immediately stood up and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. The Great Lord took advantage of the situation and attacked again. "I've played enough." The Empyrean Fairy shouted coldly, and came in front of Tang Zheng, taking on the Great Lord for him. The Great Lord faced the Empyrean Fairy, and the pressure increased. He immediately retreated, but was still forced back by the Empyrean Fairy. Tang Zheng secretly sighed. Although he had reached the 1st grade of Yuanying, he was still weak. However, this battle with the Great Lord had already benefited him a lot. Looking at the battered and exhausted Great Lord, Tang Zheng made up his mind. He turned his gaze and stared at the elder angler who was staggering and quietly escaping into the forest. The old fisherman was not an idiot. Seeing that the situation was hopeless, he thought of sneaking away. As long as there was life, there was hope. "Elder angler, do you still want to leave?" Tang Zheng roared. With a point of his finger, the War Soul Sword flew towards the elder angler. The elder angler turned his head and saw the War Soul Sword flying towards him. He had almost lost his life to the War Soul Sword, so he was especially afraid of it. Thus, he subconsciously waved his arm. With a flash of cold light, a fishing rod appeared in his hand, and he faced the War Soul Sword. Ka-cha! The War Soul Sword slashed the fishing rod, and the War Soul Sword broke into 2. The elder angler simply abandoned the War Soul Sword and rushed into the forest. Tang Zheng followed him like a shadow, and chased after him without a word. Seeing this, the Great Lord roared, and narrowly dodged the Empyrean Fairy's attack. Then, he did not dare to stop and rushed into the forest. "Chase!" The Empyrean Fairy shouted, and chased after him like lightning. The others also reacted as if they had just woken up from a dream. Especially Wu Junshan, it was his first time seeing the Empyrean Fairy's skills. It was truly shocking. The Azure Dragon Hall Great Lord, who was once invincible in his heart, was only a so-so. He was actually chased to the point of fleeing. He saw the Elder Angler jumping up and down in the forest like a monkey, his figure erratic. He was clearly using the familiar terrain to try and get rid of Tang Zheng. How could Tang Zheng let him succeed? He immediately drew his bow and the shooting sun arrow left the bowstring with a so sound. Seeing this scene, the Elder Angler was almost scared out of his wits. He no longer had a weapon in his hand, so he had no way to block this arrow. He watched as the shooting sun arrow flew closer and closer. Although he used all his skills, he dodged the shooting sun arrow. However, before he could catch his breath, he found that another arrow was already waiting for him in the direction he dodged. Although he was a second-grade martial king, and Tang Zheng was only a first-grade Yuanying, Tang Zheng had 2 saint artifacts. Even if there was a difference of 1 level, Tang Zheng could still kill him. In the end, the Elder Angler had no chance to dodge. He watched as the shooting sun arrow pierced his chest, the tail of the arrow still trembling in his chest. A heart-wrenching scream burst out from his throat. Then, the scream slowly weakened, and the light in his eyes gradually dissipated. Finally, all the sounds came to an abrupt end. The world was completely silent. The Elder Angler fell backwards. Bang! He fell to the ground, his eyes wide open, and he breathed his last. The dignified Azure Dragon Hall Great Lord ended his life just like that. The Great Lord happened to see this scene from afar. His eyes were about to split open as he roared, "Tang Zheng, I want you to pay with your blood." Tang Zheng coldly snorted and said, "Your Azure Dragon Hall has killed so many cultivators over the years. You only have yourselves to blame for all of this." The Great Lord did not attack. Instead, he chose a small path and fled to the back of the mountain. "You want to escape? In your dreams." Tang Zheng chased after him. The Empyrean Fairy also took the lead and chased after him. She expressionlessly looked at the dead Elder Angler, then focused her attention on the escaping Great Lord. When the others saw the Elder Angler's corpse, their reactions were much greater, especially Wu Junshan and Lan Yu. A dignified martial king had actually died in the hands of their son. All kinds of feelings welled up in their hearts. They were left far behind by their son. Tang Zheng chased the Great Lord to a cliff in the back of the mountain. The mountain wind was biting cold. The 10,000 zhang cliff was a hopeless situation with no way out. The Great Lord also stopped. "You finally can't escape. You've always been curious about what kind of face you have under that mask." Tang Zheng also stopped and stared at the Great Lord like a tiger eyeing its prey. Chapter 936. The High Lord looked at the group of people who were eyeing him covetously and laughed sinisterly. "Do you think you can kill me like this? You already have nowhere to run. Do you still dare to jump off the cliff? This is a bottomless abyss. No matter how high your martial arts are, I don't believe you can survive." Tang Zheng said firmly. Even if I die, I won't fall into your hands." The High Lord was filled with righteous indignation. "Then do you dare to jump?" "Why wouldn't I dare?" After the High Lord finished speaking, he turned around and jumped off the cliff. "Ah!" Everyone cried out in alarm. They were truly frightened by this action. The High Lord actually jumped off the cliff to commit suicide. The High Lord's figure quickly disappeared into the fog below the cliff. Tang Zheng stretched his neck to look at this scene. For a moment, he was at a loss. The others also leaned over the cliff to look. The biting cold wind blew up from the cliff as if it wanted to sweep them down. Everyone retracted their necks and took a few steps back to distance themselves from the cliff. They looked at each other in dismay. "He died just like that?" Wu Junshan asked blankly. Ever since he knew of the existence of the Azure Dragon Hall, he was extremely afraid of the High Lord. But the person who made him so afraid died so easily. He found it hard to accept. Tian Chanzi said, although the High Lord is very powerful, but after all, there is a limit. Facing so many experts, he had no way to escape. Jumping off the cliff to commit suicide would be a bit more enjoyable. Lan Yu shook his head in disappointment. It's just a pity that I don't know what kind of face is under that mask. Little Zheng said that there was still a jade-faced flying dragon, but I didn't see any trace of him. Wu and Li Xiaotian stared at the cliff. Wu felt relieved, while Li Xiaotian felt a sense of relief. On the other hand, Tang Zheng and Empyrean Fairy were extremely calm. Their gazes intertwined as they looked at each other deeply. Unknowingly, they saw something unusual in each other's eyes. Suddenly, their eyes slightly changed as they said at the same time, something is wrong. Maybe he is not dead. With Tang Zheng's understanding of the High Lord was definitely not someone who was willing to accept his fate. Even if he was in a desperate situation, he would not give up hope and not make a final struggle. This was completely out of line with his character and style. Therefore, the two of them determined that the High Lord was not dead. Hearing their words, the others subconsciously looked at the two of them in confusion. Although the Great Lord's martial arts were powerful, this was still a 10,000 zhang cliff. He did not have wings, nor did he have the ability to fly. How could he not die? Tang Zheng understood everyone's doubts very well. He explained, my lord has been plotting for so long and has been waiting in the dark for an opportunity to take action. If he jumped off the cliff so easily, wouldn't he be too stupid? Then how could he secretly control the martial sect, Li Palace, and Sword Pavilion? This was absolutely illogical. The others thought about it carefully and also realized what was going on. This was indeed the case. Everything was too strange. I'll go down and take a look. Tang Zheng made up his mind. I'll go too. Tian Chanzi and Empyrean Fairy said in unison. Tang Zheng shook his head and said, Tian Chanzi, you go down with me. Fu Yao, you stay with the others, just in case. These people could not fight against the High Lord, and they did not know what dangers were lurking in the dark. Of course, they could not easily leave them here alone. Empyrean Fairy was the strongest, so she was the most reliable person to stay behind and take care of them. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded in agreement. Tang Zheng and Tian Chanzi immediately jumped down from the cliff. However, a light flashed under their feet, and they were already flying on their swords. There were layers of fog in front of them. They were very careful, afraid that there would be unknown dangers in the fog. They safely passed through the fog, and their eyes suddenly opened up. The ground was already in sight, but the towering trees were small. It was obvious how tall they were. He definitely did not fall. Let's pay attention to the cliff and look for him. Tang Zheng analyzed. Tian Chanzi agreed wholeheartedly, and the two began to look for him on the cliff. Their flying speed was very slow, so the two searched very carefully. Not long after, Tang Zheng shouted, Tian Chanzi, there's a cave here. The cave was not small, and it was as tall as a person. Moreover, there were some fresh traces at the entrance of the cave, the rocks had been crushed. He definitely escaped into this cave. I already knew that he had a backup plan so he wouldn't die so easily. Luckily we found him. Otherwise, if we waited for him to escape, it would be difficult for us to find him again. Tang Zheng rejoiced. Let's go in. Tian Chanzi could not wait and rushed in front. His cultivation was higher than Tang Zheng's, so if there was any danger, he would naturally have more defensive power. The entrance of the cave was a little damp, but after a few meters, it was dry. The mountain wind blew in from the entrance, and the air was not turbid. Instead, it was clear. The end of the cave could not be seen, and they did not know where it extended. The two looked at each other and said in a low voice, could it be that we can escape from this mountain through this cave? Could it be that this is the Azure Dragon Palace's backup plan? Tang Zheng did not know. This was something that even Li Xiaotian did not know. In the entire Azure Dragon Palace, perhaps only the High Lord knew. It was no wonder that he deliberately led everyone to the back of the mountain. It was because he had already thought of using this plan to escape. Let's go quickly. Hopefully, we can catch up to him. Tang Zheng said without hesitation, his nerves tense. Okay. Tian Chanzi agreed without hesitation. Then, the two chased after him as fast as lightning. The deeper they went, the darker the cave became. In the end, it was completely dark. The two were not in a hurry to light up the cave. Instead, they groped around in the dark. They did not know where the High Lord was hiding. If they lit up the cave, they would expose themselves and alert the High Lord, making it harder for them to catch him. The two did not make any sound of footsteps at all. Even their breathing was controlled so that it was almost inaudible. They were like ghosts, quietly moving forward. They walked farther and farther, and felt that they seemed to have reached the center of the mountain. This cave actually led to here, which was really surprising. Suddenly, a faint light came from the front, illuminating the cave. The two subconsciously slowed down and looked at each other. They knew that they were very close to their target. Finally, the light became more and more intense. The cave seemed to be lit by fluorescent lights, as if it was daytime. Tang Zheng and Tian Chanzi's pupils shrank. The scene in front of them suddenly became clear. The cave turned into a hall, and there was something erected in the middle of the hall. When Tang Zheng and Tian Chanzi saw this thing, their hearts could not help but beat violently. Their pupils also widened. This was a crystal. Tang Zheng and Tian Chanzi were very familiar with crystal. They had just brought back a large piece from the Swedish royal family. And this crystal was even bigger. They did not know what was hidden in it. At that time, the crystal was left behind by a meteorite falling on the ground. Could it be that this crystal was also left behind? But they did not know why it fell into the hands of the Azure Dragon Palace. The target they were looking for was in front of them. The High Lord was standing in front of the crystal attentively. He looked excited and whispered in a low voice, as if he was whispering to someone. No matter what the situation is, let's catch him first. Tang Zheng decisively made a decision. The High Lord had gone through untold hardships to get to this crystal, and he was rambling like a person on the verge of death. But Tang Zheng had a very bad premonition. The High Lord had gone through so much trouble. There must be a purpose, and it was far from being as simple as it seemed. Tian Chanzi also had the same concerns. Of course, he also had the same countermeasures. He saw that he went straight to the High Lord. The High Lord turned a deaf ear, as if he did not know that there were two enemies standing behind him. Humph, let's see how long you can stay calm. Tian Chanzi stretched out his big hand and grabbed the High Lord. The High Lord cleverly dodged, then slipped behind the crystal and looked at the two with a sneer. Tian Chanzi caught nothing, but he was not discouraged. Facing a master like the High Lord, it was normal to miss in one hit. Tian Chanzi was not discouraged. He shouted, "Let's see how long you can be arrogant." After saying that, he was ready to go over the crystal and capture the High Lord. Just then, Tang Zheng shouted, "Be careful." Tian Chanzi's movements suddenly froze, and then he retreated like lightning. When he looked carefully, he was overwhelmed with shock. The huge crystal began to change. It became transparent, but there was no strange creature inside. Instead, there was a person, a woman. The woman was in her 30s. Her hands were closed, and she was dressed in ancient clothing. There was a classical charm between her eyebrows. This scene shocked both Tang Zheng and Heaven Monk quite a bit. Why wasn't there any other unknown creature inside the spa, but a person? The crystal was a foreign object. Could it be that this woman was also from another world? There were people in another world, and they were not all strange creatures. For some reason, when he saw this woman, Tang Zheng's heart was suspended. He had a very bad premonition. The two looked at each other, not knowing what to do. Since the High Lord deliberately came here, could it be that there was something strange about the crystal, or could it be that it could help him? The two were puzzled. Seeing the High Lord's provocative face behind the crystal, Tian Chanzi finally could not bear it and was about to rush over and beat him. But at the critical moment, Tang Zheng pulled him back, because he saw that the crystal was shrinking. Before long, half of it disappeared. Tang Zheng fiercely pulled Tian Chanzi's clothes and reminded him, "This crystal is strange. It keeps shrinking. It is completely different from our crystal." Tian Chanzi also nodded in agreement. This was contrary to common sense, so it was definitely not a good thing. The crystal was shrinking at a speed visible to the naked eye. The crystal was like melting ice, but there was no dripping water, nor was there a dense mist. The powerful energy was completely restrained and gathered in the woman's body. Both of them were stunned. They were very clear about how powerful the energy contained in a crystal was. The energy of such a large crystal was completely integrated into the woman's body. How strong was her body to be able to hold so much energy? Even the sea could not hold hundreds of rivers. Chapter 937. What kind of eyes were those? They were as vast as the stars, making people subconsciously sink into them and unable to extricate themselves. If one's cultivation was weak, they would be directly immersed in them and would not be able to control themselves. Tang Zheng suddenly remembered that the eyes of the unknown creature in the crystal had many similarities with this woman. Could it be that this was a characteristic of the members of that world? He did not know the answer, but he realized that the situation had become troublesome. He reminded Tian Chanzi, "Be careful of her." The Great Lord sneered, "It's too late. Consecrator, kill these two." Consecrator. Tang Zheng was shocked. The Azure Dragon Palace Hall had a total of 3 consecrators. Besides the Elder Angler and the fair-faced Flying Dragon, there was also the most mysterious female consecrator. It was actually this person. Li Xiaotian had only heard of her name, but had never seen her before. As far as she knew, even her master, Granny Li, had never seen her before. No one would have thought that this person was actually in the cliff cave behind the Azure Dragon Palace Hall, and was even sealed in a crystal. Many questions appeared in Tang Zheng's mind. Since this person was a consecrator of the Azure Dragon Palace Hall, could it be that she was not a person from another world? But how could she merge into the crystal and absorb the energy of the crystal in an instant? No one gave him an answer. End of story. The female consecrator's eyes flashed coldly, and she was already attacking the two. "Retreat!" Tian Chanzi suddenly shouted. His senses were sharper than Tang Zheng's, so he had already realized how powerful this person was. Tang Zheng had a telepathic connection, so he turned around and ran, Tian Chanzi bringing up the rear. Whoosh! The two returned to the dark cave one after the other, and ran out of the cave as fast as lightning. The sound of the wind whistling behind them was very clear that the female consecrator was not far behind them. "You go first." Tian Chanzi pushed Tang Zheng and turned around to face the female consecrator. Tang Zheng's heart trembled, and he subconsciously shouted, "Tian Chanzi, be careful." He did not insist on staying. Since this female consecrator was so powerful, he had to let the Empyrean fairy deal with her. Therefore, he tried his best to escape from the cave and flew to the peak of the mountain on his sword. Immediately, he heard a loud rumbling sound behind him. It was obvious that Tian Chanzi was fighting with the female consecrator. "Tian Chanzi, you have to hold on." Tang Zheng prayed silently. He passed through the fog and saw the figure on the mountain peak. He shouted, "Fu Yao, go and save Tian Chanzi." Whoosh! The Empyrean fairy swooped down and flew past Tang Zheng, disappearing into the mist. The others asked in panic, "What's going on down there?" Tang Zheng landed on the mountain peak. Seeing everyone's anxious expression, he hurriedly comforted them, "Don't worry, everything is under control." However, his heart was beating like a drum. That female consecrator was too hard to fathom. He did not know who was stronger between her and the Empyrean fairy. Boom! 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 Loud noises came from below. The fog rolled and the mountain peak trembled. The sound of fighting was very fierce. Suddenly, a few figures rushed out of the fog. The first one was Tian Chanzi. He looked a little embarrassed and had several wounds on his body. Tang Zheng was shocked. Tian Chanzi was already in the first tier of the semi-god realm, but he still looked so embarrassed. It was obvious how terrifying this female consecrator was. However, Tian Chanzi was not seriously injured, which was a blessing in disguise. The Empyrean fairy and the female consecrator rushed out of the fog together. The fog had been completely dispelled, as if it had been cut into pieces by thousands of swords. Seeing the battle between the two of them, the others couldn't help sucking in a cold breath. The two of them were completely floating in the air, and every move they made was extremely fierce. Even though they were very far away, there was a suffocating feeling that made it hard for them to breathe. The Empyrean fairy's magic weapon was a divine weapon, while the female consecrator had a string of bells on the back of her hand. When she shook her arm, the bells wouldn't stop ringing. The sound of the bells seemed to be magical. As soon as the demonic sound entered their ears, they felt their bodies become light, as if their souls were about to leave their bodies. Everyone, be careful of the demonic sound of the bells. Tang Zheng quickly calmed down and reminded them anxiously. Hearing this, everyone's expression changed. They felt like their hearts were swaying, and they almost lost their minds. Immediately, everyone felt the power of the bells. As the bells shook, the crisp sound spread between heaven and earth. Circles of ripples swept toward the Empyrean fairy like waves after waves. The Empyrean fairy looked serious. Since she woke up, this was the first time she faced a threat. Her opponent's bells were also divine weapons. The key was that her opponent's strength was slightly higher than the 100 Faces Star Sovereign. For the time being, the Empyrean fairy couldn't determine a winner. The two sides were in a deadlock. Seeing the two fighting fiercely, Tang Zheng's thoughts ran wild. He glanced down the cliff and happened to see the Lord standing at the entrance of the cave, looking up at the battle in midair. Tian Chanzi, let's deal with the Lord. Tang Zheng suggested. Tian Chanzi was also watching the fierce battle without blinking. In his mind, he recalled his thrilling battle just now. He almost died at the hands of the female consecrator, Tang Zheng. He couldn't help but feel a lingering fear. Where did this female consecrator come from? How could she be so powerful? She was also in the divine transformation realm. The strangest thing was that she was also a cultivator. The Azure Dragon Palace had always regarded cultivators as their mortal enemy. Why would they have a cultivator as a consecrator? There were too many contradictions, and he couldn't figure it out. After hearing Tang Zheng's reminder, Tian Chanzi immediately looked at the Lord standing at the entrance of the cave from afar. His killing intent surged. Whoosh! He turned into an afterimage, disappeared, and swooped down at the Lord. The Lord's expression changed when he heard the sound of something breaking through the air and the figure getting bigger and bigger. Tian Chanzi was still in mid-air when he slashed down with his sword. Only this sword was left in the world. The sword light flashed, and the sword chi was thousands of rays. In an instant, it fell at the entrance of the cave. Panic flashed in the Lord's eyes. He didn't dare to fight back, but he didn't retreat into the cave. Instead, he jumped off the cliff. Boom! With a loud noise, the entrance of the cave collapsed and turned into a pile of ruins. It buried the entrance and splashed up smoke and dust. The High Lord fell down quickly. A strong wind blew past his ears, causing his clothes to flutter in the wind. He suddenly raised his head to look, just in time to see Heaven Monk chasing after him like a shadow. The Lord didn't have the ability to fly, so he was at a disadvantage when facing Tian Chanzi. The Lord's toes touched the cliff, and the momentum of his fall was reduced sharply. He finally stabilized his body. He didn't know when, but there was a long sword in his hand. With a shake of the sword, he greeted Tian Chanzi who was falling from the sky. Tang Zheng and others had only seen him use non-phase method before, but they had never seen him use swordsmanship. At this moment, seeing this swordsmanship, Tang Zheng and Tian Chanzi's pupils shrank at the same time. They were all masters of swordsmanship, so they judged the power of this swordsmanship at a glance. Ding! With a crisp sound, the sword in Tian Chanzi's hand and the sword in the Lord's hand were against each other. The two swords bent back involuntarily and bounced back. Clang! Both of them flew backwards, but Heaven Monk only took a step back before stopping. Then, a sword came from the west, Heaven flying immortal. The Lord's sword flashed, and the sword flowers filled the sky. In an instant, they intertwined into a sword light. Kacha! The sword light dissipated, and the Heaven flying immortal broke all of the Lord's swordsmanship. It was extremely simple. Puff! With a flash of blood, the tip of the sword directly pierced the Lord's chest. Blood splashed. The Lord was quick-witted and jumped off the cliff directly, not letting the long sword pierce his chest too much. He was lucky to escape, but his eyes flashed with deep sadness. Once Nanfei's method was useless, he couldn't do anything to Tian Chanzi. Tian Chanzi didn't let him go. He chased after him, and the two fell off the cliff quickly. Every once in a while, the High Lord would stomp on the walls of the cliff to slow down his fall. In the air, the female consecrator and the mysterious Lady of the Nine Heavens were locked in a fierce battle. When they suddenly saw this scene, they turned pale with fright. They immediately abandoned the mysterious Lady of the Nine Heavens and turned to rush towards the Heaven Monk in an attempt to save the High Lord. Tian Chanzi suddenly felt a cold murderous aura behind him. He was shocked. The magical sound of the bell had poured into his ears. His soul suddenly trembled, and his movements subconsciously slowed down a bit. While he was at a loss of what to do, a shooting sun arrow flew over from afar. The female consecrator's eyes turned and coldly stared at Tang Zheng, who was standing in the distance. Her eyes were cold. Her jade hand quickly reached out, and in a flash, she firmly grabbed the shooting sun arrow. Suddenly, she was pushed forward a few steps by the shooting sun arrow. She quickly stabilized her body and turned around, firmly locking on to Tang Zheng. "Go to hell." She softly said these two words. With a wave of her hand, the shooting sun arrow flew towards Tang Zheng. Its speed was not inferior to the previous one. Tang Zheng knew the power of the shooting sun arrow and quickly took out the holy armor shield. Clang! With a crisp sound, the shooting sun arrow fiercely hit the holy armor shield. Tang Zheng felt as if he was hit by a high-speed train. He quickly retreated. His arm was numb, and the holy armor shield flew out of his hand. Fortunately, the holy armor shield was a heaven-grade treasure. Although the shooting sun arrow was a sacred tool, it was not used with the heaven-shocking bow, so its power was greatly reduced. Otherwise, the holy armor shield would not be intact. Tang Zheng was well aware of this, so he immediately stabilized his body and picked up the heaven-shocking bow and the shooting sun arrow in mid-air, afraid that his two treasures would fall off the cliff and disappear without a trace. The female consecrator's pupils constricted. She was extremely dissatisfied with the result, but the High Lord was in danger. She could not care less about Tang Zheng, so she abandoned Tang Zheng without hesitation and turned to attack Tian Chanzi, trying to save the High Lord. The High Lord was lucky enough to escape from Tian Chanzi's hands and gasped for breath. Tian Chanzi dodged from afar. Only then did he feel the overwhelming killing intent behind him, causing him to not dare to advance rashly. With this female consecrator, the High Lord had reversed the situation and was almost invincible. The female consecrator stood beside the High Lord and looked at the group of people expressionlessly. Empyrean Fairy and the others also subconsciously stopped their attacks. The short battle had already allowed them to have a rough understanding of each other's strength, and they understood that they would not be able to defeat each other in a short period of time. "Who exactly are you?" Empyrean Fairy was extremely curious about this woman who was on par with her. The female consecrator said expressionlessly, "Azure Dragon Palace's consecrator, Xian Yin." "Why are you helping the Azure Dragon Palace?" "You are a warrior, why are you helping the enemy?" Tang Zheng asked first. Chapter 938. Facing Tang Zheng's question, Xian Yin remained indifferent, and coldly replied, "Although I am a cultivator, I am not the same as you. What do you mean by that? Tang Zheng was puzzled. Because I am not a cultivator from this world, I am naturally different from you. Why can't I be your enemy? Xian Yin said. These words were like a clap of thunder, causing everyone to be dumbstruck. Tang Zheng's head trembled, and he immediately asked, if you are not a cultivator from this world, then which world are you from? He had previously guessed that Xian Yin was from another world, but he had later denied it. Now that he heard this answer, all sorts of feelings welled up in his heart. It turned out that he had guessed correctly. Since she was not from this world, it was possible for her to help anyone. However, why did she become a consecrator of the Azure Dragon Palace? Xian Yin swept his gaze across, as if he had seen through Tang Zheng's thoughts, and directly said, back then, New Era was only able to build the Azure Dragon Palace with my help. Do you think there's a problem with me being a consecrator of the Azure Dragon Palace? You helped New Era build the Azure Dragon Palace? This was definitely explosive news. Everyone was shocked and at the same time, they found it inconceivable. But without any doubt, she asked. This was definitely not her bragging. A light flashed across Tang Zheng's eyes as he came to a realization. I understand, I have always been very suspicious about what kind of ability New Era had to be able to expel all the cultivators, but now I finally understand, he did not rely on his own strength. I'm afraid you are the key factor. Xian Yin looked at him with admiration and said, you are really smart. You can actually rely on fragmented information to completely understand the truth. Then why did you do it? Tang Zheng asked angrily, do you know how cruel this is to our world, and even to those cultivators? The reason why this world became a small world was closely related to the expulsion of cultivators. If there were cultivators, then this world would not have been demoted to a small world, and there would not have been any possibility of destruction. Xian Yin said coldly, this is not my world, why should I be merciful to this world? But what's in it for you? Tang Zheng was unwilling to give up. He would not give up until he got to the bottom of the matter. Xian Yin smiled coldly. Of course it's beneficial to me, but it's even more beneficial to my world. How can you guess the mysteries behind it? Then where exactly are you from? Seeing that the other party was deliberately mystifying, Tang Zheng asked again. The other world, which is what you call the heavens beyond heaven, Xian Yin said proudly. She was obviously very proud of the world she lived in. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. The realm beyond heaven was infamous. No one would have thought that someone from the realm beyond heaven would appear in this world. But now that Xian Yin had admitted it herself, everyone realized that the situation had become very complicated. Tang Zheng was anxious. This meant that the unknown creature was also from the sky beyond heaven. He gradually had a very bad premonition. He muttered to himself irresolutely, you said that doing this would bring great benefits to your world, and you purposely banished the other practitioners to the sky beyond heaven. Could this be your goal? You need those practitioners. Xian Yin was slightly startled. She said in surprise, you're really smart. Although I don't know you, from your performance, you're definitely one of the best of the younger generation in this world. I don't need your praise. Tang Zheng said unhappily. I just want to know your ultimate goal. What will you do to those expelled practitioners? Also, what benefits will this bring to your world? Xian Yin sneered. You want me to answer your questions? Impossible. Tang Zheng flew into a rage. There are so many of us. Do you think you can escape? If you don't tell me the truth, I'll have no choice but to use the soul-searching book. Then all the answers will be easily solved. The only one here who can threaten me is her. Xian Yin snorted disdainfully. She pointed at the Empyrean fairy and said confidently, but if she wants to stop me, it's impossible. Tang Zheng glanced at the Empyrean fairy. Seeing that she didn't refute this, it meant that Xian Yin was telling the truth. If she wanted to leave, no one here could stop her. A high elder of the Azure Dragon Palace actually turned the situation around. Tang Zheng was very unwilling to accept this. Of course, it wasn't that he didn't gain anything. At least he now knew that the Azure Dragon Palace could do such a shocking thing with the help of Xian Yin from the sky beyond sky. But this was all history. What was more important was Xian Yin's purpose for doing all this. What was this unspeakable purpose? Would it still threaten this world? This was what Tang Zheng was most concerned about. The Empyrean Fairy was silent for a while. Then she stepped forward and closed the distance between her and Xian Yin. Her red lips moved slightly. Xian Yin, if you leave alone, I may not be able to do anything. But you're bringing a burden with you. Do you think you have an absolute chance of winning? Of course, this burden was referring to the Great Lord. When the Great Lord heard this, his face under the mask turned red. Even his neck turned red. His eyes were burning with anger, but he was also helpless. With the Empyrean Fairy's strength, she was indeed qualified to say this. He couldn't refute it at all. Tang Zheng keenly sensed the Great Lord's embarrassment. He laughed mockingly. Great Lord, you've always been hiding behind the mask and not showing your true face. You're like a rat hiding in the sewers. You can only watch from the shadows and live forever in the dark corners. The Great Lord was ridiculed by the Empyrean Fairy. He couldn't refute, but when he heard Tang Zheng's sarcastic words, he was furious. He clenched his fists so tightly that blue veins popped out. He couldn't wait to pounce on Tang Zheng and kill him. Tang Zheng naturally understood his thoughts, so he deliberately said these words to provoke him so that he would lose his mind and take off the mask. He was very curious about the face under the mask. The Great Lord took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in his heart. He looked meaningfully at Tang Zheng and said, "You're really a smart person. You actually want to use this kind of method to provoke me. Unfortunately, I've long passed that age. How could I fall for your trick?" Tang Zheng secretly sighed. His plan had failed. The Great Lord was after all the master of the Azure Dragon Hall. He had too many outstanding aspects. This kind of small trick was indeed difficult to use. The Great Lord looked at Tang Zheng and the others with ridicule. "I won't drag down Sir Consecrator. Besides, do you really think that you can defeat my Azure Dragon Hall just by destroying this place? Wishful thinking. If the Azure Dragon Hall was really so easily defeated, then it would have vanished into thin air for hundreds of years." Tang Zheng suddenly said, "It's said that the Azure Dragon Hall has a lot of people, but this time I only saw a few people. Where did the others go?" "Haha, you've finally learned to be smart and asked a crucial question. But why should I tell you?" The Great Lord laughed sinisterly. "All the answers will naturally be revealed once I capture you. You don't have that ability." The Great Lord retorted, subconsciously hiding behind Xian Yin. A dignified Great Lord of a generation hiding behind a woman. If news of this got out, wouldn't people laugh their heads off? The Great Lord of course knew that this kind of influence was extremely bad, but in order to save his life, he decided to ignore it. "Kill!" Suddenly, a sharp voice came from the Empyrean Fairy's throat. Her figure flashed as she attacked Xian Yin. Ever since the Empyrean Fairy had awakened, this was the first time her killing intent had been aroused. Even when she faced the Hundred Faces Star-Lord, she didn't have such a strong killing intent. That was because she felt a strong sense of danger from Xian Yin's words. This wasn't just for her, but for the entire world. In the face of external aggression, the Empyrean Fairy subconsciously regarded herself as the master of this world. Precisely because of this, she was especially angry at the Azure Dragon Hall who colluded with Xian Yin. She swept a glance at the Great Lord, full of intense killing intent. It was as sharp as a knife, causing the Great Lord to subconsciously avoid her gaze. The Empyrean Fairy's attack was like a thunderbolt, powerful and powerful. The stately painting suddenly expanded like a curtain, covering the sky and covering everyone's heads. It was dark. The only thing that could be seen was the painting. The mountains and lakes on the painting became lifelike and rapidly expanded, as if they were identical to the real thing. A boundless power was emitted from the stately painting. This time, there were no mountains, no torrents, no wind, and no rain, but the feeling it gave off was even more oppressive and terrifying. This power was formless, yet pervasive. Everyone present could feel it. As long as one was under the stately painting that covered the sky, no one could escape. However, the two groups of people felt completely different. Tang Zheng and the others didn't feel too uncomfortable. Although they felt the power of this power, it didn't attack them. Xian Yin and the Great Lord felt completely different. The power attacked them from all directions, from top to bottom, from front to back, from left to right. The look in their eyes changed. This was a killing move, completely incomparable to the previous attack. Xian Yin gritted her teeth and asked, "What kind of power is this?" "The primordial power." The Empyrean fairy squeezed these 4 words out of her teeth. Her expression was unprecedentedly focused and dignified. The primitive force was a force hidden in the map of mountains and rivers of the gods and Vale. This magic treasure was refined by a supreme master in ancient times. It encompassed the heavens and earth, mountains and rivers, and was almost identical to the real world. However, the root of all this was the primordial power. It was a mysterious power that existed between heaven and earth. Ordinary people couldn't see it at all, let alone extract it and use it as a means of attack. However, the Supreme Master did it. This gave the stately painting great power. However, it was not easy to activate the primordial power in the stately painting. It consumed a lot of power, and it also required the caster's strength. If it wasn't a matter of life and death, she would never use it easily. Just like in the previous dangerous battle, she didn't activate the primordial power. At this moment, she was really angry. She was angry at Xian Yin and the Great Lord, so she didn't hesitate to use this killing move to inflict serious damage on them. Chapter 939. Xian Yin was from the outland, so she did not know much about the chaos force. However, this did not stop her from seeing how powerful this force was. Therefore, Xian Yin and the Lord felt threatened at the same time, and both of them used everything they had. Asterisk ring ring ring, asterisk. A series of sounds came from the bell in Xian Yin's hand. The bell glowed with a bronze-yellow light and intertwined around her body. Gradually, it formed a huge bell that enveloped her. The sound of the bell became louder and louder. The light became thicker and thicker. It was as if a huge bell was protecting her. The Lord did not have divine powers like Xian Yin. He stabbed the sword in his hand. Rays of sword light intertwined and floated above his head. Asterisk boom boom. Asterisk. The chaos force finally fell. The rocks on the cliff shattered and fell to the ground, turning into dust. The bell formed by the light trembled. The sound of the bell became louder and louder. It was resisting the chaos force. Asterisk crack. Asterisk. The sword light above the Lord's head did not hold on for long. It collapsed like a piece of rotten wood. Asterisk pft. Asterisk. He spat out a mouthful of blood. The rocks under his feet shattered and he fell down the cliff. Seeing this, Xian Yin roared, "Break!" The light of the bell shone brightly and the sound became like thunder. Asterisk crack. Asterisk. A crack appeared on the bell. A beam of yellow light shot into the sky from the opening and collided with the painting of mountains and rivers of the gods of Vale. The mountain-river map shook violently and the chaos force was greatly reduced. The Empyrean fairy's eyes turned cold. She quickly channeled her inner energy. Asterisk pft. Asterisk. Xian Yin spat out a mouthful of blood. Her face turned pale. The crack on the bell grew bigger and the light dimmed. At the same time, the chaos force weakened. The Empyrean fairy felt as if her energy had been sucked out of her body. Most of the vital energy in her body was depleted. She became a little sluggish. Xian Yin took this opportunity to fly down. She grabbed the Lord, who was falling at a high speed. Holding the broken bell in one hand, she fell down the cliff. The Empyrean fairy had won this battle. Although she had used up a lot of vital energy, she was not injured. In order to save the High Lord, Xian Yin did not hesitate to forcefully activate her magic treasure. In the end, her magic treasure was damaged and she was injured and vomited blood. When Tang Zheng saw that the Empyrean fairy was on the verge of collapsing, he immediately rushed over to support her. With her soft body in his arms, he didn't have a trace of lust and asked with concern, "How are you?" The Empyrean fairy shook her head and said, "Chase after them quickly. If we let them escape this time, it won't be so easy to find them again. Tian Chanzi, go after him." Tang Zheng shouted. One should not pursue a cornered enemy. However, this group of people were not cornered enemies, but ferocious tigers. Once the tigers returned to the mountains, there would be no end of trouble. Tian Chanzi dived down the cliff while Tang Zheng helped Empyrean fairy to the top of the mountain. He handed her over to Wu Junshan and the others and asked them to take good care of her. "You have to be careful too." Seeing that Tang Zheng was about to chase after them, they hurriedly warned him. The scene just now had really taught them a vivid lesson. This was the strength of the strong practitioners. Their fighting strength was indeed extraordinary. They were far from being able to compare with them. In fact, they couldn't even compare with their own son. Wu Junshan and Lan Yu were deeply moved. Looking at the figure chasing down the cliff, the two of them anxiously looked at each other. There were too many inexplicable feelings in their eyes. Tang Zheng and Tian Chanzi flew to the bottom of the cliff one after another. From afar, they saw the figures of Xian Yin and the High Lord. The High Lord did not know how to fly, so he seriously dragged Xian Yin down. He was caught by Xian Yin and fell down awkwardly. "Stop!" Tian Chanzi roared and chopped down with the sword in his hand. From the top to the bottom, the power was terrifying. Xian Yin looked up and happened to see that the sword light was about to fall on her head. Her expression darkened as she shook the broken bell. In an instant, a yellow light soared into the sky from the bell. This yellow light was much weaker than before. Its power was sharply reduced, but it met the sword light head-on. Boom! The two lights collided and exploded. The sky became incomparably gorgeous. The cliff was hit by the light, and rocks flew everywhere. A large part of it collapsed. The two of them were actually evenly matched in this exchange. Everyone was shocked. Xian Yin's face became more and more gloomy. The High Lord couldn't help but twitch his mouth. In an instant, the Empyrean fairy had turned the situation around. The High Lord was flustered and exasperated, but there was nothing he could do. Tian Chanzi and Tang Zheng were overjoyed. They originally thought that Xian Yin was more powerful, but it seemed that they had overestimated her. Her injuries were not light, and her strength had been greatly reduced. Unexpectedly, she was almost on par with Tian Chanzi. Tang Zheng calmed down and said in a low voice, "Tian Chanzi, this is a rare opportunity. Fu Yao is no longer able to fight against her. It's up to us now." Tian Chanzi nodded happily. "You're right. We have to use all our strength to keep them here." After saying that, he increased his speed and was already behind Xian Yin. Xian Yin waved her delicate hand, and the bell flew to her head. It kept shaking, and the demonic sound entered people's ears, causing their minds to sway. Tian Chanzi's face darkened, and he actually stopped. This demonic sound was very different from before. It was indeed powerful, causing people's minds to sway and almost lose their minds. It was precisely this short delay that allowed Xian Yin and Tian Chanzi to pull apart the distance between them. They could see the bottom of the cliff very clearly. The lush forest was dark. If they fell into it, it would be easier for them to hide and escape. Tang Zheng was extremely anxious, he did not care about Tian Chanzi's absent-mindedness, and chased after them. In an instant, he closed the distance between him and Xian Yin. Holding the heaven-shocking bow in his hand, the shooting sun arrow slid past his fingertips and shot towards them with a shocking sound. Insignificant skill. Xian Yin snorted in disdain. Although her strength had temporarily decreased, she still did not put Tang Zheng in her eyes. She did not even bother to use a magic treasure. She pointed her finger in the air, and a vast and mighty power surged out. The shooting sun arrow instantly stopped in midair. It was forcibly blocked by this force. But before Xian Yin could be happy, he realized that Tang Zheng's figure was actually right in front of him. This person is really not afraid of death. Since you're courting death, I'll fulfill your wish. The bell shone brightly, releasing a soul-stirring power, and the ringing sound enveloped Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng's eyes became sluggish for a moment, then he regained his senses, and burst out with a burst of shock. He felt that there was something strange in his mind, but after circulating his innate qi, he regained his composure. He finally understood one of the powerful aspects of Xian Yin. She not only attacked the physical body, but also the mind. That bronze-yellow light attacked the physical body, while Ding Ling Ling's demonic sound attacked the mind. The most terrifying thing was that this demonic sound was all-pervasive, making it impossible for people to guard against it. He also finally understood why Tian Chanzi was absent-minded earlier. It turned out that it was the influence of the demonic sound. But why didn't he have much of a reaction? He guessed that it was because he did not have the inner demons. Just as this thought appeared, the voice of the inner demons rang out, "Young man, you're right, this woman's bell can indeed attack a person's mind. But it's too child's play, it can't be compared to mine." Qiyu scoffed, and said, "You're pushing yourself to the top. This woman is not simple. Visitors from the sky beyond heaven have never appeared in our time. Perhaps they have discovered our world, so they sent people to explore it, just like how we sent people to explore the sky beyond heaven. Their goal is obviously more aggressive than ours. Otherwise, why would she use tricks to expel all the cultivators to the sky beyond heaven?" The inner demons retorted. "That's natural." Qiyu did not object. "Then do you know what their goal is?" "Do you know?" the inner demons asked. "I don't know for now, but as long as we catch her, we will know." Tang Zheng's heart moved, and he hurriedly asked, "Do you have a way to catch her?" "Of course." Qiyu was full of confidence. The inner demons disdainfully said, "No matter how strong you are, this woman's attack is a mental attack. Your methods may not work." "Who said they're useless?" Qiyu said, unconvinced. "Then let's have a competition and see whose methods are more useful." The inner demons argued. "Let's have a competition, who's afraid of who? We'll each use our own methods and see whose methods are more effective." Qiyu said angrily, "Tang Zheng, I'll teach you a set of leg techniques. This is my own creation, called the heaven-splitting leg." "Humph, what heaven-splitting leg? Such a flashy name, it's definitely not much." The inner demons scoffed, "Tang Zheng, I'll teach you a mental attack technique called the mind manipulation technique." Tang Zheng was secretly delighted. As the saying goes, when the sandpiper and the clam fight, the fisherman benefits. Qiyu and the inner demons did not see eye to eye and fought each other, which benefited him. These two were not ordinary people, and the techniques that leaked out from under their fingernails were not common either. "Time is of the essence, hurry up and tell me what to do," Tang Zheng purposely urged. "I'll tell you. Why don't you evaluate who's stronger?" In a split second, two streaks of light appeared in Tang Zheng's mind, and two sets of cultivation techniques immediately appeared in his mind. He was ecstatic. These two sets of cultivation techniques were definitely very powerful. Although he had only taken a rough look, he was already shocked by these two sets of cultivation techniques. The heaven-splitting leg was a perfect set of leg techniques. It focused on mobilizing the strength of the legs and strengthening the strength of the legs. Tang Zheng had already cultivated the chaotic Vajra spell, and his entire body was as tough as steel, so the heaven-splitting technique was twice the result with half the effort. When his mind moved, an image appeared in his mind, and one move after another automatically evolved. This set of leg techniques was actually a quick method. In just a blink of an eye, he had learned everything. This set of leg techniques was extremely simple, but it was extremely exquisite and overbearing. There were a total of 5 moves, which were, sweeping away 1,000 soldiers, stepping on mountains, divine dragon tail, heavenly blade revolution, and splitting the heavens and earth. This set of leg techniques would automatically increase in power as one's cultivation increased, but it also had an extremely high requirement for the cultivator's physical fitness. Not only did it have an extremely high requirement for the toughness of the legs, it also had an extremely high requirement for the control and flexibility of the body. Chapter 940. Tang Zheng immediately shifted his attention to mind manipulation. Mind manipulation focused on mental attacks, which was the same as the demonic sound of the bell, but had many differences. Mind manipulation didn't require the help of an external medium. With a very short incantation and the corresponding mental cultivation method, everything would flow naturally. With a single thought, everything about mind manipulation was deeply imprinted in his mind, and the speed of learning was no less than that of heaven-splitting kick. Tang Zheng had never practiced a mental attack technique, which was very rare in this world. Even the Empyrean Fairy and Tian Chanzi didn't know how to use it. Therefore, compared to heaven-splitting kick, he was more interested in the inner demon's mind manipulation. Seeing that Xian Yin and the High Lord were very close to the treetops at the bottom of the cliff, Tang Zheng grabbed the shooting sun arrows that were colliding with the copper-yellow light and chased after them. At this time, Tian Chanzi also caught up and said indignantly, "This woman is really powerful. She even used a mental attack technique. I almost fell into her trap." Mental attacks hurt people invisibly. Even if it couldn't kill the opponent, it was enough to make the opponent fall into an illusion. It was more difficult to guard against than other physical attacks. "I'll deal with her." Tang Zheng volunteered. Heaven Monk looked at him in disbelief and said, "Can you do it?" "TCH, how can a man say no?" Tang Zheng smiled evilly and directly chased after the two. Tian Chanzi looked at him deeply and muttered, "This kid always surprises me. Don't you know that this is a scare? I can't do anything, but you are so confident. Isn't this a blow to me?" Tian Chanzi wanted to cry but had no tears. However, he didn't stand by and watch. Whether Tang Zheng was bragging or not, at least he would join the battle. Whoosh! The air was pierced with a sharp sound. Xian Yin's heart trembled. She looked up and saw 3 shooting sun arrows flying at her at high speed. Xian Yin felt bad. She had consumed a lot of energy. At first, she didn't take the shooting sun arrows seriously. However, the simple exchange just now gave him a new understanding of the power of the shooting sun arrows. The shooting sun arrows were definitely not as simple as she thought. This time, the 3 arrows were fired simultaneously, and the power was even greater. She threw the Great Lord down and said, "You go first, I'll catch up later." The High Lord's speed suddenly increased, and then he steadily landed on the treetops. Without any hesitation, he jumped into the dense forest and disappeared without a trace. Damn it, the High Lord actually escaped. Tang Zheng cried out in alarm, but he was too far away. He could only watch as the Great Lord disappeared into the woods. Since the High Lord was nowhere to be seen, all the more reason he couldn't let Xian Yin go. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to gain much from this trip. His gaze locked onto Xian Yin as he leaped towards her. Xian Yin took out her little bell, causing it to fly up and float above her head, emitting a bronze-yellow light. 3 copper-yellow rays of light shot out from the bell, and met the 3 shooting sun arrows head-on. A dazzling light burst out in midair. The attack of the shooting sun arrows was neutralized, and the light also disappeared. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Tang Zheng casually put away the shooting sun arrows that were at the end of their flight into his bag, and then stomped down. Step on the mountain. This was one of the moves of the heaven-splitting leg technique. In that instant, Tang Zheng's entire center of gravity sank, and his legs glowed with a golden luster. This was the effect of the chaotic Vajra spell. He suddenly descended. His feet seemed to possess boundless power, enough to crush mountains. Moreover, the momentum of his descent was very compatible with this move, making it even more powerful. Bang! Xian Yin did not dodge. Instead, she relied on her slender hands to meet the enemy. She raised her hand above her head, and Tang Zheng's foot just happened to land on her palm. Time and space seemed to have been frozen. In their eyes, there was only each other, and sparks seemed to be flying. Under that attack, a shockwave spread out in all directions from the point where the hands and feet collided. Tang Zheng's momentum was stopped, but he did not stop his attack. Instead, he used the Heavenly Blade Revolution. Whiz! With a sweep of his long leg, it was like a long spear sweeping towards Xian Yin's head. A cold light flashed in Xian Yin's eyes. She naturally saw the power of this leg technique and reprimanded, "What kind of leg technique is this?" "Heaven-splitting leg," Tang Zheng said indifferently as he increased the strength of his leg to the limit. Xian Yin immediately raised her hands to block, grabbing onto one of Tang Zheng's legs, but the huge force caused her to take a step back. "Heaven-splitting leg? That's quite a big name," Xian Yin said sternly. Using all the strength in his hands, Tang Zheng's leg that was being grabbed was about to break. Tang Zheng immediately activated the chaotic Vajra spell, and immediately, a golden luster appeared on his legs. Xian Yin suddenly used all her strength, but she was still unable to injure her muscles and bones. She exclaimed in surprise, as if she was surprised by the strength of Tang Zheng's defense. Tang Zheng still had some lingering fear, but he would not give her a second chance to use her strength. Although he was very confident in his chaotic Vajra spell, his opponent was an expert of the semi-god realm after all, so he did not dare to take the risk. Thus, with a move that could sweep away 1,000 armies, Tang Zheng's other leg swept towards Xian Yin's neck. A gust of wind blew over, and she felt a chill on her neck, causing her expression to change slightly. This set of leg technique seemed simple, but in reality, it had anticipated many situations in actual combat. It seemed ordinary, but in reality, it was ever-changing. There was a saying that no matter how many changes there were, it was still the same. This set of leg techniques was a typical example of this. The simple leg technique included many combinations and changes. A series of attacks made people unable to defend against it. Tang Zheng also gradually understood this point, and couldn't help but look at Qiyu in a new light. As expected of the leg technique created by Qiyu, there were many places where Qiyu's shadow could be seen. This set of leg techniques was particular about being fierce and domineering. It was of the same origin as Qiyu, and it was also suitable for Tang Zheng's style. Under the sweeping of 1,000 armies, Xian Yin had no choice but to let go of Tang Zheng and subconsciously retreat. Tang Zheng escaped, but he did not retreat. His body leaned back, and with a forward somersault, he struck down with one leg towards Xian Yin. Divine Dragon Tail Swing. At this moment, his leg was like the tail of a divine dragon, fiercely swinging down with a heart-palpitating power. At the same time, the dragon chi and dragon might in his body automatically mobilized. Pow! The air exploded like a firecracker. The power of this kick was even greater than Tang Zheng had expected. Tang Zheng, the dragon god technique you cultivate is actually very compatible with this divine dragon tail swing, so it automatically mobilized your dragon chi and dragon might. The inner demons was surprised. Qiyu said proudly, "Now you know how powerful I am. The cultivation technique I created is definitely not a small matter." The inner demons snorted, but did not refute. From his point of view, Qiyu did not seem to be bragging. Tang Zheng was secretly delighted. He silently circulated the dragon god technique. The power of this move was not yet exhausted, and it was even more powerful. Xian Yin narrowed her eyes slightly. If she was at her peak, she would not be afraid of these leg techniques. But now that she was seriously injured, it would not be so easy. Moreover, her opponent did not necessarily want to kill her. He only wanted to capture her. Moreover, as long as he could stall for time and wait for the Empyrean fairy to recover, she would have nowhere to run. In fact, Tang Zheng understood this, so he did not want to kill her. That was a fool's dream. Xian Yin gritted her teeth. She had never thought that she would encounter such a defeat. She was forced into such a sorry state by a first-grade Yuanying. Moreover, this set of leg techniques was very strange and powerful. It was not something that someone of his cultivation level should possess. She did not have time to think about it. She hurriedly circulated her energy, causing the bell to emit thousands of rays of light. The sound of the bell became even louder. The demonic sound entered his ears, and there was no sound anywhere else. It was completely poured into Tang Zheng's ears. Xian Yin had already realized that Tang Zheng's mind was firm. Ordinary spiritual attacks would not be effective. Therefore, she accumulated all the demonic sound in order to give him a fatal blow. If it was before, even if Tang Zheng did not have the inner demons, he would still be greatly affected. But now that Tang Zheng had learned the mind manipulation technique, he was able to comprehend spiritual attacks by analogy. As soon as the demonic sound entered his ears, he immediately activated the mind manipulation technique. Since the mind manipulation technique could take the hearts of others, it could naturally avoid such attacks. The inner demons were great at spiritual attacks. Compared to them, Xian Yin was still 10 streets away. Even if the inner demons revealed a little bit of their techniques, it was absolutely not to be underestimated. Xian Yin was originally waiting for Tang Zheng to lose his mind so that she could quickly escape into the woods and disappear. But she saw the corner of Tang Zheng's mouth curl up into a faint smile. Her heart trembled. She cried out in alarm. Bang! The divine dragon swings its tail directly shattered the light on the bell. With a cracking sound, another crack appeared on the bell. Ah! Xian Yin was shocked. The bell was a sacred tool. Its power had been greatly reduced because of the previous crack. This time, a part of it was actually destroyed by the divine dragon swings its tail, forcibly creating a crack. Tang Zheng also did not expect this. The power of the divine dragon swings its tail was much greater than the original because of the effect of the divine dragon arts. Seeing Xian Yin turn pale with fright, Tang Zheng moved his lips and chanted an incantation. At the same time, he activated the mind manipulation technique. An invisible force enveloped Xian Yin. After all, she was an expert in spiritual attacks. She immediately reacted, her eyes releasing a terrifying light. You also know how to use spiritual attacks. Xian Yin's voice became sharp. Previously, she only felt that Tang Zheng was a little extraordinary. But now, she knew that he was the most troublesome person she had ever met. There were very few people in the world who were good at using spiritual attacks. She was only able to cultivate spiritual attacks because of a chance encounter. It was precisely because of this that she was chosen to come to this world with a mission. Spiritual attacks were not only used to attack others, but more importantly, they could also affect others. This was a realm that many other physical attack experts could not reach. When she arrived in a new world and faced an unfamiliar environment, the spiritual attack technique was very useful. Moreover, she also shouldered an even more important mission. Influencing others would be twice the result with half the effort. New Era was influenced by her, and then attacked the center of Huaxia from the wilderness outside the pass. In the end, she expelled the cultivators and completed her mission. Furthermore, New Era established a new dynasty. If not for her appearance or bewitchment, none of this would have happened. This world would have entered a new world. Therefore, she was the one who affected this world. Facing the attack of the mind manipulation technique, Xian Yin's mind almost lost control. Although her cultivation was high, in terms of spiritual attacks, she was far from being as high as her own cultivation. Chapter 941. Xian Yin hurriedly activated the bell and enveloped herself in light in an attempt to defend herself against the mind control technique. However, she still failed. She felt as if her mind was in a trance and she was about to lose control. She was very clear about the serious consequences of losing control. It was very likely that Tang Zheng would control her mind and she would become a puppet. This was something that she had done to others before. She did not want it to happen to her even in her dreams. Tang Zheng did not expect the mind control technique to succeed and control her. Thus, he took advantage of the moment when she was distracted to raise his leg. Heaven-splitting earth. This was the most powerful technique in the heaven-splitting leg technique. In an instant, the aura of heaven and earth was stirred up by this attack. Tang Zheng's leg seemed to possess such great power. It broke through the air and rapidly descended. Pang! With a loud bang, Tang Zheng's leg struck the bronze-yellow light. With a crack, the light shattered. However, this attack did not use up all of its strength and still landed on Xian Yin's shoulder. Pooh! She spat out a mouthful of blood. Her mind became more and more dispirited and unstable. Tang Zheng's will was like a sword and was about to drill into Xian Yin's mind. Xian Yin's heart trembled. However, she knew that at this critical moment, even if her cultivation level was much higher than Tang Zheng's, if she could not resist, she would become a puppet and would never be able to rise again. She unwillingly widened her eyes and stared at Tang Zheng, not bothering to hide the raging anger in her eyes. Tang Zheng was delighted. He knew that he was about to succeed. This mind control technique was indeed powerful. Of course, if not for the heaven-splitting leg technique, he would not have succeeded so quickly. This set of leg techniques was not inferior to the Flying Immortal's sword technique in close combat. There was no need to rely on magical weapons. It was all based on one's own strength. It had indeed benefited Tang Zheng a lot. Suddenly, his pupils shrank. He looked at Xian Yin in disbelief. This was because a mist rose from Xian Yin's body and enveloped her whole body. Tang Zheng found that his consciousness could not penetrate the mist and the mind control technique had lost its effect. He roared angrily. Was he going to fail at the last minute and let her escape this calamity? He was not willing to give up just like that. Another leg flew up, and a divine dragon swings its tail attack was launched. Bang! A huge repulsive force bounced back from the fog. His leg did not penetrate the fog, and the repulsive force made his leg bones ache. He immediately realized that something was wrong, but it was too late, because the fog quickly condensed and turned into a crystal. She was sealed by the crystal again. Looking at this scene, Tang Zheng was shocked speechless. Except for Tian Chanzi and him, the others had not seen Xian Yin's previous situation, but seeing this change, they were also shocked. Tang Zheng's shock was even more intense, because he knew that Xian Yin had been hiding in the crystal at first, but he didn't expect that she could actually control it as she pleased. Not only did she allow him to escape from the crystal, she could also seal him inside again. Tang Zheng's mind control technique could not penetrate the crystal to attack her, and the energy contained in the crystal was so strong that even a physical attack could not hurt her. Tang Zheng was not willing to give up, and with a flying knife, he kicked the crystal. The crystal fell down quickly, but it was not damaged at all. Tang Zheng sighed and quickly caught up with the crystal. Holding it in his hand, the crystal gradually turned from transparent to blurry. Xian Yin's eyes were filled with unwillingness and anger as she stared at him, leaving a deep impression in his mind. At this moment, Tian Chanzi came out of the forest. Just now, he saw that Tang Zheng had completely taken the initiative, so he directly rushed into the forest to chase after the High Lord. However, the forest was too dense, and this was an unfamiliar environment, so he did not chase after the High Lord and returned empty-handed. He glanced at the crystal in Tang Zheng's hand and said in surprise, "What's going on? Where's Xian Yin?" Tang Zheng pointed at the crystal and said, "She's in there. She sealed herself in there, and we have no way to break it." Tian Chanzi still remembered the strength of the crystal and waved his fist in annoyance. This woman is really cunning. Previously, when he was being chased by Xian Yin in the cave, he was in a very sorry state, which made him suffer a lot. When he saw that Tang Zheng had the upper hand, he thought that he could capture the other party, but he did not expect that she actually had a trick up her sleeve. Now, no one could do anything to her, so they could only stare at the crystal helplessly. Tian Chanzi looked deeply at Tang Zheng and said, "How did you do all this?" Tang Zheng laughed, "A hermit has his own clever plan." Then, he jumped and flew back to the top of the cliff. The others had been watching them without blinking, so they had clearly seen the battle between Tang Zheng and Xian Yin. They had also seen Xian Yin's strange methods, so they all had complicated expressions. This was especially true for the Empyrean fairy, who frowned because she had never seen such a situation before. Is there no way to get her out? The Empyrean fairy asked curiously. Tang Jing spread his hands. I don't have a way, but you can try. Okay, then I'll try. The Empyrean fairy clenched her fist and threw a punch at the crystal. Boom! A muffled sound rang out. Fortunately, Tang Zheng had firmly held onto the crystal, otherwise it would have been sent flying. The crystal was still intact. The Empyrean fairy's expression dimmed. She was very clear on the strength of her punch. Since it did not cause any damage to the crystal, it was enough to show how powerful it was. Wu Junshan asked with a complicated expression, then is there really no way? He was a martial artist, so he could not think of a better plan, but he could not help but frown when he saw that everyone was in trouble. It's not that there is no way, but it will take a lot of time. It's not something that can be done in a short period of time. Tang Jing muttered. It's good that there is a way. What is it? Lan Yu was delighted to hear this and asked. Tang Zheng looked at the couple and said, this crystal is a body of energy. As long as we absorb all of its energy, Xian Yin will naturally be able to see the light of day again. Then, we will have a chance to deal with her. The Empyrean fairy and Tian Chanzi did not object, because this was the best way. However, the most important point was that Xian Yin could take the initiative to melt the crystal and escape. If she brought it back to the island like the previous crystal, then it would be a disaster. Once she escaped, the people on the island would become living targets. No one would be her opponent. Tang Zheng had an idea and suggested, why don't I put her into Sumera Heavens? That way, she won't be able to escape from me. Sumera Heavens was Tang Zheng's territory. He had the final say. Anyone who entered it would not be able to escape. In addition, he could absorb the crystal's energy at any time and place. Over time, his cultivation would increase greatly. Even if she escaped in the future, he would not have to worry. The Empyrean fairy guessed Tang Zheng's thoughts and nodded in agreement after thinking for a while. This method is feasible, but you must remember that she is very important. She is related to the conspiracy of the realm beyond heaven. Understood. This is the most important thing. Tang Zheng nodded in agreement. The purpose of the other world was definitely not simple. If they did not figure it out, it would be a hidden danger. As for what happened to the cultivators who were expelled, it was also very important to know what happened to them. It was a pity that they did not have anyone from the realm beyond heaven by their side. The demons who returned from the realm beyond heaven had all died in a series of battles. No one could answer this question. Sigh, I should have captured a few demons who returned from the realm beyond heaven. That way, I would have been able to find out what the realm beyond heaven is all about. Tang Zheng sighed regretfully. There is no medicine for regret in this world. Besides, time will give us the answer. The Empyrean fairy did not mind. Tang Zheng smiled. At this moment, Qi Yu and the inner demons were locked in a fierce argument. Both of them wanted to take the credit for themselves. They both said that it was because of him that they were able to capture Xian Yin. They were in a deadlock. Tang Zheng, you be the judge. Qi Yu said angrily. The inner demons also said, that's right, young man. You be the judge. Was it because of my mind manipulation that Xian Yin had no choice but to give up and seal herself in the end? It was clearly my heaven splitter leg's continuous attacks that exhausted her. Even without your mind-absorbing technique, Tang Zheng could have easily captured her. Who needs your help? Qi Yu retorted. Tang Zheng helplessly shouted in his mind, stop. This time, both of you contributed. It was because of both of you that I was able to capture Xian Yin. Young man, you can't say that. There is always a question of how much credit one has contributed. Who do you think contributed the most? The inner demons did not give up and asked. Qi Yu also said, that's right. Who contributed the most? Say it so that some people will understand their own abilities. Tang Zheng suddenly had an idea. There was no doubt that this time he had gained a big advantage. If it wasn't for Xian Yin, these two would not have been able to use qi to teach him the heaven-splitting kick and mind manipulation. They must have many other skills or things that would be useful to Tang Zheng. If they were fair and there was no competition between the two, it would not be a good thing for him. This time he had tasted the sweetness of competition and felt that it was necessary to drive a wedge between the two. If they continued to fight, he might be able to take advantage of them next time. He gradually had a plan in his mind. After thinking for a while, he said, the heaven-splitting kick was very useful. After all, with my cultivation, I was able to suppress Xian Yin. This is already incredible. Hearing this, Qiyu laughed and said with satisfaction, Inner demons, are you convinced now? My heaven-splitting kick is even more powerful. The inner demons snorted unhappily. But Tang Zheng did not finish his words and continued to add, but at the last moment, the mind manipulation played the most important role. If it wasn't for the mind manipulation, with the influence of the other party's demonic bell sound, I would not have been able to gain any advantage. It would have been impossible to force her to seal herself. So in the end, the mind manipulation was more important and more effective. Chapter 942. Qiyu was stunned. He did not expect this to be the result. This was too much of a bully. He was indignant. Tang Zheng, why is this the result? Tang Zheng had already anticipated his reaction and calmly said, I am just speaking the truth. Qiyu was furious, but he could not refute. After all, his heart was still in Tang Zheng's hands. He angrily snorted and said, Inner demons, don't be so proud. The inner demons laughed, I am proud. What can you do to me? Changing the topic, he said to Tang Zheng, young man, what you said is the truth. Ha, I find that I actually like you a little. Don't. Tang Zheng refused, I am not glass. What is glass? The inner demons were confused. Qiyu disdainfully said, you don't even know this, what a country bumpkin. Do you understand the benefits of being gay? Disgusting. The inner demons was furious. Tang Zheng was too lazy to pay attention to the two's argument, and directly put the crystal into Sumeru world. With a thought, the crystal's energy was continuously absorbed into his body from Sumeru world. This was just like absorbing air. He could absorb the energy of the crystals at any time and place, but he could not absorb too much at once. In other words, one could not become fat in one bite. He enjoyed this process very much. As for Sumeru world, the crystal became transparent, and Xian Yin's eyes were wide open, but there was nothing she could do. Tang Zheng subconsciously looked down the cliff and asked, can you really not find the High Lord's whereabouts? Tian Chanzi shook his head, this person is very cunning, when I chased after him, I already lost track of him. Tang Zheng was helpless, alright, although it is a bit regretful, but this time the Azure Dragon Hall suffered a heavy blow, and also captured Xian Yin, so this trip was not in vain. Marshall suddenly interjected, the Azure Dragon Hall's people are already mostly dead, and this is only a heavy blow? Tang Zheng guessed what she was thinking and nodded, the Azure Dragon Hall's strength is not limited to this. We were too optimistic. Although we've gotten rid of Elder Angler and some flying guillotines, their true power hasn't been uprooted yet. Furthermore, the High Lord hasn't been caught yet, so he still has a chance to make a comeback. Wu Junshan and Lan Yu secretly nodded. They agreed with Tang Zheng's point of view. They had been in the martial organization for most of their lives, so they could clearly deduce the general strength of the Azure Dragon Palace. The strength of the Azure Dragon Palace was definitely not limited to this. Otherwise, how could it lead the martial organization, the Li Palace, and the Sword Pavilion? Moreover, they had only killed a few flying guillotines this time. The remnants of the Li Palace, the Sword Pavilion, and the martial sect had not appeared, so the strength of these people could not be underestimated. I already know the whereabouts of Li Palace and Sword Pavilion. Tang Zheng glanced at Li Xiaotian, who had not said a word since the beginning. This information was dug out from her mind. Since the High Lord has escaped, then let's make a trip to these two places. Tang Zheng said. Wu Junshan and Lan Yu's eyes lit up as they cheerfully applauded. They were relatively familiar with the Li Palace, but they were very curious about the Sword Pavilion. This was because the Sword God was powerful and his actions were secretive, so the martial organization did not have much contact with him. The others naturally did not have any objections and walked down the mountain. Seeing Li Xiaotian remain silent, Tang Zheng asked with concern, "Are you all right?" Li Xiaotian took a deep breath and raised her head. She squeezed out a smile, but it was very bitter. "I'm fine." Tang Zheng nodded and said, "Don't think about the past. Put your thoughts on the future. People can't choose the past, but they can choose the future." Li Xiaotian's eyes lit up and she nodded, "I understand. Thank you." Tang Zheng did not try to persuade her any further. The group quickly descended the mountain and headed towards their next destination. The Sword Pavilion was located on a dangerous peak. The precipitous cliffs were like a sword piercing the heavens. The Sword Pavilion had a total of 300 sword slaves, and the core of the Sword Pavilion was the Sword Hut. It was said that the Sword God had comprehended sword techniques in the Sword Furnace and finally reached great success. The Sword Pavilion was rarely visited by people. The highest peak in a chain of undulating mountain peaks was called the Divine Sword Peak. The steep and bumpy mountain forest seemed to have become flat ground under their feet. They were many times faster than ordinary people. They were unimpeded and arrived at the undulating mountain peaks outside the Sword Pavilion. Suddenly, the Empyrean Fairy raised her hand and everyone subconsciously stopped. "There's an ambush," the Empyrean Fairy said in a deep voice. Tang Zheng's pupils constricted. The sword slaves of the Sword Pavilion should not be so close to the outside. They should be closer to the inside. However, the Empyrean Fairy would never make a mistake, so he warned, "Everyone, be careful. Li Xiaotian, stay behind me. I will protect you." Li Xiaotian had powerful martial arts, but she didn't know how to use them. Therefore, Tang Zheng had no choice but to protect her. After this journey, Li Xiaotian's mood had stabilized, and he obediently followed behind Tang Zheng. "Go." They took a few steps forward. Suddenly, whoosh! Whoosh! Streaks of sword light seemed to emerge from the ground as they strangled the group of people. The Empyrean Fairy was walking at the front, but she was indifferent. These sword lights could not hurt her at all. Just as they were about to get close to her, an invisible force vibrated from her body, and the sword lights shattered. At the same time, Tian Chanzi also acted. The long sword in his hand trembled, and sword lights scattered all over the sky, accurately intercepting those sword lights. In an instant, all of the attacks collapsed, as if they had never appeared. This scene shocked the sword slaves hiding in the dark, and their breathing involuntarily quickened. Tian Chanzi's gaze turned, and he immediately locked onto the position of the sword slaves, and lightly slashed out with his sword. The sword chi was like a rainbow. The sword slaves were stunned. They had only seen this kind of powerful sword technique from their master, the Sword God. Who were these people, and why were they so powerful? But there was no time to think, and they subconsciously raised their swords to block. Crack! The long sword broke. They could only watch as the sword chi entered their foreheads. A line of blood bloomed, and their vitality was cut off as they fell to the ground, dead. Tang Zheng knit his brows as he looked at the sword slaves, and doubtfully said, "The sword slaves shouldn't be placed in such an outer area. They seem to have expanded the defensive circle." He had learned from Li Xiaotian's brain that the Sword Pavilion's defensive formation was very different from what he saw now. "It seems like Song Yu did something, and changed the Sword Pavilion's defensive formation." Martial's anger towards Song Yu had never decreased. Back then in the Imperial City, everyone had almost died in the explosion that he had detonated. This enmity was deep in his bones, and he would never forget it. Thus, Martial angrily said, "He definitely knows that we are not dead, so he is guarding against our revenge." Tang Zheng laughed in disdain, "So what if he is guarding against it? These defenses will not change the outcome." Tian Chanzi urged, "Then let's hurry up and destroy the Sword Pavilion, then we can go to the Li Palace." The few of them continued forward, and not long after, they met the second group of sword slaves. However, this time, the number of sword slaves and their resistance were clearly stronger. It was precisely because of this that they believed that their actions had been exposed, so they immediately rushed towards the steep divine sword peak as fast as lightning. The few of them quickly cut through the chaos, and without any obstruction, they arrived at the foot of the divine sword peak. Everyone soared into the air, and with the tip of their feet on the cliff, they did not take the normal path, and directly rushed towards the top of the divine sword peak. Tang Zheng held on to Li Xiaotian's hand. She was extremely nervous, and her palms were covered in sweat. Whiz! A sword flew over from the top of the mountain, and directly shot towards Tang Zheng. With a thought, there was no need for him to make a move. The War Soul sword appeared out of thin air, and welcomed the sword. Clang! A spark flickered, and the sword broke into two, but the War Soul sword was still intact. Everyone had already flown halfway up the mountain, and were about to reach the top of the divine sword peak. Suddenly, the sound of something tearing through the air rang out, and 36 sword beams flew over from the top of the mountain, surrounding everyone. This is a sword formation, everyone be careful. Tian Chanzi immediately saw through the profoundness of the formation, and reminded everyone. Everyone braced themselves as the 36 swords were about to arrive. The 36 swords seemed to have eyes, and automatically split into several parts, each attacking their opponent, but at the same time responding to each other. Tang Zheng was shocked. This sword formation was not simple, as expected of the sword pavilion. They had their own unique understanding of the way of the sword, and they also understood the essence of it. Without a doubt, the existing warriors in the sword pavilion were unable to control their swords from a distance, but they could use the sword formation to achieve a similar effect. But looking at the 36 swords that were moving freely, Tang Zheng remained calm and composed. Seeing a few swords flying over, he waved his War Soul sword, and with a clang, sparks flew, all of them slashing onto the swords. However, he felt a huge rebound force being transmitted from the War Soul sword to his palm. Furthermore, with one strike, the War Soul sword was not able to break the seemingly ordinary sword. The sword formation gave these seemingly ordinary swords different characteristics. Humph, you want to stop us with just a mere method. Tang Zheng growled. The War Soul sword shone brightly, the sacred artifact's power completely erupted, and the sword flew out. Shwa! A lightning-like sword light shot out from the War Soul sword, directly slashing towards one of the swords. The person controlling the sword seemed to have sensed the danger and hurriedly retreated. However, it was already too late. Tang Zheng's aura had firmly locked onto the sword. Crack! With a crisp sound, the sword light directly split the sword into two. The sword formation was damaged, and its power was greatly reduced. Some of the swords seemed to be drunk as they started to sway. The others were all experts, so how could they miss this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? Thus, they took the opportunity to counterattack. With the sound of battle, the sword formation was broken. The 36 swords broke one after another, and all of the attacks disappeared into nothingness. Everyone smiled knowingly. The tip of their feet tapped on the cliff, and then they soared into the air, steadily landing on the top of the divine sword peak. The sword furnace immediately appeared in front of everyone. The sword furnace was not big. It was like a straw hut, extremely simple and crude. However, in the eyes of an expert, this sword furnace was not simple at all. Every blade of grass and every tree contained the way of the sword. No wonder the sword god was comprehending sword techniques in the sword furnace. This place was indeed unique. Just by looking at it, it firmly attracted everyone's attention. However, their attention was immediately attracted by another matter. Chapter 943. In front of the sword furnace, a figure stood proudly like a desolate ancient sword. His two sword-like eyebrows were raised high, filled with sword intent. Qi Sha. This person was the sword god's disciple. He had fought with Tang Zheng and the others in the Changbai Mountains. Tang Zheng's expression was slightly cold as he stared at him. Compared to before, Qi Sha's aura was completely different. His cultivation had clearly improved by a lot. He still remembered Qi Sha's rising sun sword technique, so he did not underestimate him. However, with so many experts around him, he did not fear him. Tang Zheng, it really is you. Qi Sha's tone was filled with boundless killing intent. You killed my master. This time, I will make you pay with your blood. Qi Sha, are you the only one? Where is Song Yu? Isn't he the one in charge of the sword pavilion? Tang Zheng asked curiously. 7 Kills said coldly, cut the crap. You'll have to get past me first. Alright, then I will test your skills. Tang Zheng took a large step forward but was beaten to it by Marshall. Let me. Marshall said, Sword God's disciple, if you miss this opportunity, you won't have it again. The meaning of these words was very thought-provoking. The Sword God's bloodline would no longer exist from today onwards. Therefore, she rushed to fight with Qi Sha. To her, Qi Sha was a very good opponent to train her martial arts. Ever since she started cultivating the Fire Underworld Divine Palm, her cultivation had greatly increased. Now, she had reached the limit of a Xiantian martial artist, 9th grade Xiantian. She was only a step away from the Great Scholar realm. This kind of cultivation speed was simply unimaginable to her in the past. She had once fantasized that if she reached the Great Scholar realm in her 30s, she would already be considered very powerful. But now, she was only in her 20s and was actually about to reach the Great Scholar realm. She was even more powerful than her master and master's wife. She was very clear on who the greatest credit should belong to. Qi Sha understood the deep meaning of Wu's words. His anger burned more and more. He said, Wu, you are in cahoots with these cultivators. I will take your life first and offer it to my master's spirit in heaven. Shua. He shook the long sword in his hand and performed the rising sun sword technique. The light at the tip of the long sword was as bright as the sun. It slowly rose from the sword, as if a red sun had risen from the sea. Marshall crossed his palms, one cold and one hot, the two attributes alternating in the center of his palms. Now, she had a deeper understanding of the Netherfire Divine Palm, and she understood more about the extraordinariness of this cultivation technique. When she first started cultivating the Inferno Divine Palm, it was very domineering, very similar to the Roaring Flame Saber that she used to cultivate. But later on, she gradually realized that when things reached an extreme, they would move in the opposite direction. When the inner strength that was like a red flame was cultivated to the extreme, it actually gave birth to an extremely cold inner strength. Fire gives birth to cold, and when things reach an extreme, they will reverse themselves. This made her feel the profoundness of this palm technique. It was precisely because of this transformation that her power had advanced by leaps and bounds, and her body had reached a miraculous state of harmony between yin and yang. At this moment, when she used this set of palm techniques, her palms alternated between hot and cold. In the end, her left hand was cold, and her right hand was hot. If it was anyone else, they would have been tormented long ago, but she would not. 2 waves of inner strength silently circulated within her body. 7 Kills could also see that this set of palm techniques was extraordinary. He still roared and thrusted his sword forward. The sun-like sword light suddenly exploded, transforming into small sword chi. Like a shotgun, countless sword chi shot towards Marshall like marbles. Marshall did not say a word, both of his palms fiercely pushed forward, a vast and mighty palm wind that alternated between cold and hot swept forward, like a huge wave that could topple mountains and overturn the seas. Bang, 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 a series of explosions rang out as the palm wind and the sword chi collided. The two of them tapped their toes and rushed towards each other at the same time. In an instant, in front of the sword furnace, the two of them were like graceful butterflies, rising and falling as they fought. Although Marshall did not have a weapon, his hands did not lose to a weapon, especially the Netherfire Divine Palm. Cold and hot alternated, blazing and cold palm wind swept towards the opponent, the killing power was astonishing. Bang! A tree was struck by the palm and broke into 2. Ice gradually formed on the broken part, and even in the summer, it still emitted cold air. 7 kills just happened to see this scene. His pupils constricted, his heart trembled, and he immediately slashed down with his sword. Puff! The sword chi was blazing. His sunrise sword art was also a very masculine sword art, so even the surging sword chi showed a masculine chi, which made people feel as if they were burning flames. The air shook and was slashed to the sides by the sword chi. Then, a rainbow pierced through the sun and the sharp sword pierced straight through, directly reaching the top of Marshall's head. Marshall growled, both of his hands rose into the air, clamping down on the sword. The surging sword chi immediately tried to harm her hands, but his palms released 2 waves of inner strength, one cold and one hot, resisting the sword chi. Moreover, the sword underwent a drastic change. One side seemed to be burned by flames, turning fiery red, while the other side seemed to be covered in ice, turning snow white. In addition, the cold and hot energy spread upwards, and soon, it reached the sword hilt. The entire sword body turned red on one side and white on the other, presenting a strange scene. 7 Kill's eyes widened as he looked at this scene in disbelief. He roared unwillingly, urging his inner strength to resist. However, crack! With a crisp sound, the sword broke inch by inch, turning into fragments that scattered on the ground. Seeing his sword destroyed, 7 Kills was heartbroken and furious, but there was nothing he could do. With a thought, Wu Xian pushed both of his palms forward. Peng peng, 2 palms struck Qi Sha's chest at the same time. Whiz! 7 Kills flew backwards into the sword furnace, leaving behind a long trail of blood in the air. Marshall took advantage of the opportunity to pursue and enter the sword furnace in a flash. This sword furnace was very simple and crude. It was a small pavilion made of straw, surrounded by simple wooden walls. 7 Kills broke the wooden door and entered the pitch-black sword furnace, while Marshall chased after him and disappeared into the darkness. Suddenly, Tang Zheng became alert and shouted, "Don't chase after him." In a flash, he chased after him, but just as he reached the door, a figure flew out. His gaze turned cold as he hurriedly caught it. It was Marshall that had fallen into his embrace. Marshall gasped for breath, his face pale, and said, "There's danger in the sword furnace." Seeing that she was fine, Tang Zheng heaved a sigh of relief and comforted her, "You step back first, I'll take care of him." Marshall was a little angry. His strength was clearly higher than 7 Kills, but after entering the sword furnace, he somehow suffered a blow and was actually kicked out in a sorry state. "Be careful." Marshall clenched his teeth and warned. Tang Zheng nodded his head lightly and walked into the sword furnace with large strides. When he crossed the threshold, a wave of hot air assaulted his face. Taking a closer look, he actually found a huge furnace in the middle of the sword furnace. It was filled with bubbling hot molten iron, and beside it were swords that had not been forged yet. They were bright red and emitting hot steam. 7 Kills stood in front of the furnace, staring straight at Tang Zheng. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, his expression was dispirited, but his brows were extremely ferocious. "Tang Zheng, you killed my master. I am not skilled enough, so I have no way of taking revenge for my master, but I will not admit defeat," 7 Kills said in a powerful voice. Tang Zheng coldly snorted, and asked, 7 Kills, you are inverting black and white. If it wasn't for the sword god coming to kill me, how could he have died in our hands? Are we going to stretch out our necks and wait for death? 7 Kills was speechless. After a long while, he said, "I don't care. In any case, master died in your hands." Tang Zheng shook his head, he did not want to argue with him and said, "I only want to ask you one question. Where are the other people from Sword Pavilion? Where is Song Yu?" There were a total of several hundred sword slaves in Sword Pavilion, but they had met too few sword slaves along the way. Furthermore, they did not see any other sword slaves on the Divine Sword Peak, so he was very curious. 7 Kills said sinisterly, "Song Yu is the same as you, ambitious and cowardly. When he heard that you were attacking, he actually abandoned Sword Pavilion and escaped with his people. If Master knew in the underworld, he would definitely be ashamed and regret passing down Sword Pavilion to him." 7 Kills was angry and unwilling, but also heartbroken. Furthermore, there were 2 handprints on his chest, one red and one white, one fire and one cold, making him look even more desolate. Escaped? Tang Zheng raised his eyebrows. This Song Yu was truly cunning, his ability to run away could be considered first class. Back in the capital, he had also escaped when the situation was bad. Now that he had heard the fighting outside, he did not hesitate to escape with a group of sword slaves. Those cowards deserve to die. They listened to Song Yu's bewitchment and have already betrayed Sword Pavilion. They are not worthy of being Sword Pavilion's people. 7 Kills angrily accused. Tang Zheng secretly nodded. After all, Song Yu was a member of a large family. He was eloquent and had many methods to bewitch people. Of course, he was not someone who only knew martial arts like 7 Kills could compare to. In the Sword Pavilion, although Qi Sha's seniority was higher than Song Yu's, he couldn't compare to Song Yu in terms of small tricks. This result was not out of Tang Zheng's expectations. However, the cooked duck had flown away, which made Tang Zheng very unhappy. He asked, "Where did they escape to?" "Don't say that I don't know. Even if I knew, I would definitely not tell you," 7 Kills said sinisterly. Tang Zheng inwardly shook his head. He knew that he would not be able to dig out any useful information from him. 7 Kills, you were clearly not Marshall's match just now, but you forced her back and even injured her. You haven't used up all your tricks yet, right? This time, I will personally witness your skills because you will not have this chance in the future. Tang Zheng had the confidence to say these words. 7 Kills did not refute him, but his eyes kept changing. In the end, he firmly locked onto Tang Zheng. He became resolute and said, "I will die with you." Boom! With a loud sound, he overturned the furnace beside him. Fiery red molten iron spurted out from the furnace and splashed in all directions. The sword furnace immediately caught on fire. At the same time, 7 Kills grabbed an unfinished long sword from the furnace. The long sword was fiery red and sizzling sounds came from his palm. There was a burnt smell coming from it. However, he did not feel anything. Instead, his face was completely red as he pounced towards Tang Zheng. The fiery red long sword in his hand lit up. The light was boundless, as if it really was a blazing sun, releasing all of its light and heat. Chapter 944. Tang Zheng subconsciously soared into the air, dodging the magma like molten iron on the ground. A wave of heat rushed over as the 7 assassins stabbed over with their fiery red swords. The blood-like fiery red sword light stung people's eyes. Tang Zheng squinted his eyes, and the War Soul sword also released a dazzling light. Clang! The 2 swords clashed and sparks flew everywhere. A few sparks landed on Tang Zheng's clothes and immediately ignited. Tang Zheng immediately circulated his energy to extinguish the flames. The War Soul sword in his hand danced, and the sword light scattered down, blocking all the flames outside his body. 7 Kills bared his teeth as he looked at Tang Zheng. He knew very well that he was burning his life force, but so what? He was going to die together with him. The reason why his fighting strength could increase by so much in an instant was all because of the Rising Sun sword technique that he cultivated. This sword technique was extremely masculine and unyielding. After forcefully enduring the pain and holding onto a fiery red sword, all of his energy and inner strength were channeled into the sword. Instead, he and this unfinished sword had reached the realm of becoming one with the sword, perfectly displaying the power of the Rising Sun sword technique. Clang! Another sword strike. The War Soul sword was undamaged, but a gap appeared on the other sword. Tang Zheng laughed coldly. How could an unfinished sword be compared to the War Soul sword? 7 Kills was also very clear about the situation. Looking at the broken sword in his hand, he gritted his teeth and cut open his other palm. Blood seeped out from his palm and dripped onto the broken sword. The blood and the broken sword merged into one, and the broken sword emitted waves of scarlet light. Tang Zheng's pupils constricted. He knew that 7 kills was making his last gamble, so he took the initiative to attack. 7 kills quickly retreated, retreating again and again. Fresh blood completely fused into the broken sword as if it was free. The broken sword's light shone brightly, instantly enveloping him. Bang! 7 kills retreated to the front of the furnace and stepped on the molten iron. However, he did not notice that the molten iron had corroded his shoes and feet, revealing his white bones. He only stared straight at Tang Zheng, and the corner of his mouth revealed a trace of a smile. It was incomparably sinister, causing one's heart to turn cold. Tang Zheng, do you think that I am courting death by leading you into the sword furnace? Ha, you're too naive. I said that I'll take you down with me. That's why I'm confident. 7 kills laughed maniacally. I don't see how you can take me down with you, Tang Zheng retorted. Really? Then do you think this sword furnace is really a broken thatched hut? 7 kills pointed around and asked jokingly. Tang Zheng's heart skipped a beat. He looked around. This sword furnace contained sword intent. This was the place where the sword god used to comprehend sword techniques, so it was not surprising that it contained sword intent. It seems like you have seen through some clues, but without my guidance, you definitely wouldn't have known. The name Divine Sword Peak is not a random name. The sword intent in the sword furnace is naturally emitted. Back then, Master saw through this point, which is why he chose to comprehend the sword again, build the sword furnace, and forge the treasured sword, because, he purposely stopped and looked at Tang Zheng with a meaningful gaze. Because what? Tang Zheng asked curiously, and his interest was indeed piqued by 7 kills. Because, there is indeed a divine sword hidden in the divine sword peak, but the divine sword is formless, only the sword intent, and the essence of the sword intent is all gathered in this sword furnace. Other than Master, only senior brother Jian Shisan and I know this secret. Song Yu, that cowardly fellow, does not know. This sword intent is the foundation of why the sword pavilion is called the sword pavilion. 7 kills said with pride. Tang Zheng subconsciously looked towards the ground, where he stepped on a small piece of empty land that was not covered by molten iron. He could clearly feel this sword intent. However, the sword intent was too scattered, as if it had become one with the mountain peak. What use could it have? Master once wanted to forge a peerless divine sword, and had already thought of a way to absorb this sword intent from the divine sword peak. Unfortunately, he did not manage to wait for this day. What Master has not done, I will do for you. As soon as he finished speaking, the broken sword in his hand fiercely stabbed into the ground. Puff! The broken sword pierced into the rocks on the ground, all the way to the hilt. In that instant, the aura within the sword furnace changed drastically. All of the scattered sword intent quickly condensed and fused into the broken sword. Tang Zheng's pupils constricted as he shouted, "Oh no!" and hurriedly slashed out with his sword, aiming for Qi Sha's head with a heavy force. If he was hit, 7 kills would probably be cut into 2 halves. 7 kills revealed a sinister smile and said, "It's already too late." Bang! The War Soul sword slashed through the air, but was blocked by an invisible force. Tang Zheng was shocked. He understood that this was the work of the sword intent. Ha ha ha, I understand now. The momentum is unstoppable. Tang Zheng, prepare to die. 7 kills laughed wildly, holding the sword hilt with both hands, he roared, "Rise!" Ka ka ka. The broken sword rubbed against the rocks, making a strange sound. In the end, the broken sword was completely pulled out. The fiery red sword looked as if it was forged from blood. The divine sword has been formed. Quickly die. The broken sword roared and raised both of its hands. Its entire body seemed to be on fire. Its eyes turned fiery red and its clothes emitted bursts of green smoke. As one with the sword, he bathed in the sword light. It was incomparably resplendent and slowly rose into the sky, as if it was really a rising sun. Tang Zheng was an expert in the way of the sword, so when he saw this scene, he immediately understood the power behind it. He hurriedly activated his cultivation, causing his innate qi to surge. The War Soul sword was good at absorbing yin qi, so it emitted a cold yin qi that enveloped Tang Zheng. Kill! 7 kills roared and turned into a ray of sword light. As one with the sword, he slashed towards Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng's eyes were bright and full of expression. Holding the sword with both hands, he watched as the fiery red sword light got closer and closer. Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind and he subconsciously brandished the War Soul sword. The War Soul sword drew a beautiful arc. It seemed slow and gentle, but it accurately caught the broken sword. Clang! A wave of sword chi surged out, but neither of them retreated. Instead, they clenched their teeth. Tang Zheng was surprised to recall that his previous strike was not the heaven-flying immortal sword technique, but the second move of the Taiji 2 form sword technique. Back then, he had learned a total of 2 moves, but he immediately forgot about them. He did not expect that the second move would appear on its own, causing him to subconsciously use it. The 2 swords were in a deadlock, but Tang Zheng's mind flashed with a flash of inspiration. He actually learned the third move in a split second. Previously, he had always wanted to learn the third move, but he had never succeeded. He did not expect that he would actually succeed this time. He really could not understand this sword technique. But now was not the time to think about this. He had just learned it, and before he forgot it, he immediately used it. The War Soul sword swung to the left, as if there was a huge force pulling the broken sword to the left, and then to the right, drawing a large circle. A surge of energy immediately emerged from the circle. From the inside to the outside, from the bottom to the top, like a fountain, it soared into the sky. Boom! With a loud sound, the energy collided with the broken sword. The 2 swords were knocked away, and the 2 people flew backwards. Kacha! The gap on the broken sword grew bigger and bigger, like a spider web rapidly spreading out. In an instant, it covered the entire sword body, and then collapsed, turning into pieces that scattered on the ground. The light on 7 kills disappeared as well. His entire body seemed to have been sucked dry of blood. He was extremely thin, his body was like firewood, and his eye sockets were deep. He was like a completely different person from before. Tang Zheng was also shocked by this scene. The power of the broken sword was actually so great, and the backlash to its owner was so terrifying. Impossible, how could this be? 7 kills looked at the pieces on the ground in a daze, as well as the monstrous sword chi released from the broken sword. He danced around, as if he wanted to gather the sword chi. However, how could the formless sword chi gather towards him? It was all futile. But he was like a madman, running around the room. Not long after, his body was set on fire, but he did not know. Tang Zheng secretly shook his head, this person had gone crazy. However, when he recalled the third move, he could not help but be deeply shocked by its power. But he was also dismayed to find that the third move had mysteriously disappeared from his mind, and he had no impression of how to use it at all. Sigh. He faintly sighed. This Taiji 2 form's sword technique was too strange. For a moment, he could not figure it out. Weng weng. Suddenly, the war spirit's sword trembled without any warning, and the sword spirit's voice sounded in his mind. Master, quickly absorb these sword chi. Otherwise, they will be wasted after they spread out. Tang Zheng was overjoyed. He had actually neglected these precious sword chi. They were already ownerless, so how could he waste them? He immediately activated his power, causing the war spirit sword to shine brightly, and with a so sound, it flew into the air. Waves of sword chi seemed to have found their loved ones, and quickly gathered in the air. Whoosh whoosh. The war spirit sword continued to absorb, and the light became more and more intense, dazzling the eyes. Tang Zheng was secretly delighted. The war spirit sword had a sword spirit, and was indeed extraordinary. Otherwise, without the sword spirit's reminder, he would have forgotten about this. With the sword spirit absorbing the sword intent on its own, he turned his attention to 7 kills and discovered that he had already fallen to the ground. His body was burning with flames, emitting crackling sounds, and was on the verge of death. Tang Zheng shook his head, and said, "You also hate Song Yu for betraying Sword Pavilion. I will get him to see you as soon as possible, so that you two can reunite." I can't accept this. I will kill you." 7 Kill's throat still emitted intermittent sounds, his killing intent still did not weaken. Tang Zheng shook his head, and said, "If the sword god was here to absorb the sword intent of the divine sword peak, then what he forged would be a peerless divine sword, and what you forged at the last minute is only a poor quality one, which is why you were defeated by my war spirit sword."